Chapter 1: The Shard of Summer. The shriek of tearing metal was the first sound to penetrate the deep freeze of Sami Begum's cryo-slumber. It was a violent, physical intrusion, a spike driven through layers of induced nothingness. Her eyelids, heavy as lead shutters, fluttered. A raw, burning cold seared her skin, even through the insulated layers of her pod suit. Her teeth began to chatter, a painful, uncontrolled percussion against the inside of her mouth. Cold, so cold. The pod, designated U-77, tilted sharply. Warning lights, crimson and amber, pulsed across the frosted viewport. Sami's limbs were stiff, unresponsive. She tried to raise a hand, to wipe at the ice already forming on the viewport's interior, but her muscles were locked in a deep, cellular chill. The burning sensation intensified, a paradoxical agony that suggested frostbite even as her mind registered the external temperature readouts flickering erratically. 38 degrees C, 42 degrees C, degrees C, then a steady, impossible 45 degrees C. A jolt threw her against the restraints. The crimson lights blazed. A synthesized voice, distorted by static, crackled. Hull breach imminent. Brace for impact. Brace for imp. The voice cut off, replaced by a deafening roar. Sami's world became a chaos of violent motion, alarms and the groaning death cries of the transport ship Icarus. Her pod was a coffin tossed in a tempest. The cold bit deeper, a gnawing predator. It felt as if her blood were turning to slush, her bones to icicles. Yet the internal pod display insisted the ambient temperature outside the failing systems was soaring. It made no sense. Her body screamed winter, her instruments blazed summer. Then silence. A profound, ringing silence, broken only by the frantic, ragged gasp of her own breath, each exhalation a white plume in the confined space. The pod was stationary, canted at a sickening angle. The emergency restraints had held. Outside the viewport, a diffuse, blinding light. Sami fumbled with the release mechanism, her fingers numb, clumsy. The cold was a vice, crushing the air from her lungs. She had to get out. The suit's internal regulators were clearly failing, or the pod was compromised. After several agonizing attempts, the harness clicked open. She slumped forward, pain shooting through her cryo-stiffened joints. The escape hatch lever was encrusted with a thin layer of ice. Ice! At 45 degrees Celsius. She slammed her palm against it, again and again, until a sliver of warmth from her panicked exertion melted just enough for the mechanism to grudgingly yield. With a hiss of escaping pressure, the hatch blew outwards, torn from its hinges by some unseen force. A blast of what should have been oven-hot air struck her. But to Sami, it was a wave of intensified, unimaginable cold, a physical blow that stole her breath and sent fresh waves of agony through her system. She cried out, a thin, choked sound. Sunlight, harsh and unfiltered, poured in. She squinted, shielding her eyes. Through the haze of her pain and the shimmering air she saw green, a dense alien green, towering trees with bizarre fan-like leaves, twisted vines thick as pythons snaking between them. And the ground, a few feet below the mangled remains of her pod, was covered in what looked like fine white sand, but it sparkled, reflecting the intense sunlight with painful brilliance. Hesitantly, Sami swung her legs out. Her boots crunched on the sparkling ground. It wasn't sand. It was ice. A carpet of granular ice, like a freak summer hailstorm that had somehow frozen solid under a blazing tropical sun. The air temperature, according to her suit's external sensor, now registering a blistering 48 degrees C, should have melted it instantly. She took a step, then another, her body shivering uncontrollably. The burning cold was relentless. Every exposed surface of her suit felt like it was being touched by dry ice. She looked at her gloved hands. Tiny crystals of frost were already forming on the synthetic material. "Hello," her voice was a reedy whisper swallowed by the vast, silent jungle. "Is anyone there? Icarus, report." Only the faint, distant crackle of static from her helmet comms answered. Nearby, another section of the ship, a twisted cylinder of metal, lay half buried in the ice-slicked earth. Smoke, or perhaps steam from the intense heat on cold metal, curled from its ragged edges. Hope, a fragile thing, flickered within her. Others might have survived. She forced her stiff legs to move, each step an agony of protesting joints and the all-consuming, paradoxical cold. The sunlight on her faceplate felt like a freezer burn. The air she breathed, thick with the scent of alien vegetation and hot metal, seared her lungs like an Arctic wind. As she neared the wreckage, a figure moved, dark, struggling. "Commander," she croaked, recognizing the broader build of Rex Dunn even from this distance. "Commander Dunn." Rex turned, his faceplate obscured by grime. He was trying to pry open a jammed access panel on the wreckage with a metal bar. He paused, looked towards her. "Begum, you made it." His voice, tinny through the comms, was strained. "Any others from your section?" "Negative, Commander, just me." Sami shivered so violently she almost fell. "Sir, the temperature. My suit readings are. They're insane. It says 48 degrees, but I'm freezing." Rex lowered the bar. He took a step towards her, then stopped. "Your suit too, huh? Thought mine was shot." He gestured around them. "Look at this place. Sun's like a furnace. Ground's frozen solid. Makes no damned sense." He tapped his helmet. "My internal temp is reading normal, but I feel off. Not cold like you describe, but clammy, unsettled." Another figure emerged from the dense foliage nearby, stumbling. Dr. Lena Hansen, the ship's medical officer, her usually immaculate uniform torn and smeared with dirt. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and confusion. "Commander Sami," Lena's voice was shaky. "Thank heavens I woke up in the trees. Pod must have broken up on entry." She hugged herself, though the sun beat down mercilessly. It's so hot, unbearably hot. My skin is burning up, but..." She gestured to the icy ground. How is this possible?" Sami stared at Lena, then at Rex. Lena claimed to be burning up. Rex felt clammy. And Sami herself was being consumed by a phantom Arctic hell. 3 survivors, 3 drastically different, contradictory experiences of the same environment. A low groan echoed from deeper within the wreckage Rex had been working on. "Someone's alive in there," Rex stated, turning back to the panel. "Give me a hand, Begum. Hansen, see if you can find a medkit. Anyone in there is going to need it." Sami tried to help, but her limbs were clumsy with cold, her fingers too numb to grip effectively. Lena, meanwhile, despite her claims of burning heat, moved with a strange lethargy, her face flushed. As Rex finally wrenched the panel open with a screech of tortured metal, a wave of genuinely hot air, thick with the smell of burnt electronics and something else, something organic and coppery, washed out. Inside, nestled amongst sparking wires and shattered cryo-units, was Kenjiro Volkov, the ship's xenobotanist. He was conscious but dazed. "Volkov, you all right?" Rex reached in. Kenjiro blinked, his eyes struggling to focus. "Commander, where? What happened?" He pushed himself up, then recoiled, clutching his head. "Og, the heat, it's like a furnace in here," he scrambled out, shielding his eyes from the sun. "Outside, it's worse, blinding, scalding." He staggered onto the ice, then yelped, hopping from one foot to another. "Ah, it's burning my feet. The ground is burning." Sami watched him, bewildered. Kenjiro, dressed in a standard light-duty ship suit, was reacting to the frozen ground as if it were red-hot coals, while she felt like she was standing on a glacier. Lena, despite her own assertions of extreme heat, looked at Kenjiro with concern. "Easy, Kenjiro," Lena said, her voice strained. "Let me take a look at you." She reached for him, but he flinched away from her touch as if her hand were a brand. "Don't, you're radiating heat. Everyone is." He backed away, his eyes wide with panic, his gaze sweeping over them, the sun, the frozen ground. "This place, this light, it's an inferno. We have to find shade, water." He pointed a trembling finger at Sami. You're practically glowing with cold. Stay away." Sami recoiled, stung. Glowing with cold. What did that even mean? A sudden, piercing shriek cut through the air from the direction of the dense jungle. It wasn't human. It wasn't any animal Sami recognized from the Icarus xenobiological databases. It was high-pitched, chittering, and filled with a predatory hunger that sent a fresh wave of entirely real, non-paradoxical fear through her. Rex instinctively grabbed the metal bar he'd been using. What in the nine hells was that? The strange, granular ice under their feet seemed to extend endlessly into the bizarre, heat-drenched jungle. The sun beat down, a palpable force. Sami's teeth chattered, her body racked with shivers that were growing more violent. Lena fanned herself weakly, her face slick with sweat. Kenjiro danced on the hot ice, his eyes darting frantically. Rex stood firm, a pillar of confused authority. The shard of summer, as Sami was already thinking of it, had pierced their reality, and nothing made sense anymore. The only certainty was the cold, the impossible, burning cold that was consuming her from the inside out, even as the world around her blazed. And somewhere in that sweltering, frozen jungle, something was screaming. Chapter 2: Contradictions in Flesh. The chittering shriek echoed again, closer this time, punctuated by a rustling in the dense, fan-leaved undergrowth that bordered their crash site. Rex tightened his grip on the metal bar. "Hansen, Begum, Volkov, stay close. Whatever that is, it sounds big enough to be trouble." Kenjiro, however, was already backing away, his eyes fixed on the shimmering heat haze rising from the ice-covered ground. "I can't stay here. It's like standing on a griddle. The trees. Shade." He gestured wildly towards the jungle. "I need to get out of this sun." "Volkov, hold it," Rex commanded, his voice sharp. We stick together until we know what we're dealing with. But it's burning me, Commander, Kenjiro pleaded, his face contorted in genuine agony. You don't understand, this cold. It's fire to me. Sami shivered, her own paradoxical torment making Kenjiro's words a bizarre echo of her reality. He might be telling the truth, sir, she managed, her words clipped by chattering teeth. I'm freezing, utterly freezing, and Dr. Hansen said she's too hot. Lena nodded weakly, wiping a bead of sweat from her temple with a trembling hand. My skin feels like it's on fire. Every breath is like inhaling steam. She looked from Sami to Kenjiro, her medical training clearly battling with the sheer impossibility of their symptoms. 3 different reactions to the same environment. It's not logical. Logic can wait, Rex grunted. Survival first. He scanned the tree line, his posture tense. Patches of his exposed skin where his suit was torn at the neck and wrists were beginning to look strange, not flushed like Lena, nor pale like Sami's. They were darkening, taking on an almost leathery, slightly thicker appearance. He seemed oblivious to it. The rustling intensified. A section of the broad, waxy leaves twitched violently. Sami felt a primal urge to flee, but her legs were heavy, her core temperature plummeting despite the 48 degrees C air. If she moved too fast, she feared she'd simply collapse into a shivering heap. Then it emerged. Not large, as Rex had feared, but unsettlingly alien. It was roughly the size of a Terran badger, but there the resemblance ended. Its body was a pale, almost translucent white, segmented like an insect, and covered in fine, crystalline hairs that glittered in the sunlight. It moved on 6 spindly legs, each tipped with razor-sharp claws that dug into the ice with surprising purchase. Its head was a bulbous nightmare, dominated by a pair of multifaceted black eyes and a set of rapidly vibrating mandibles that clicked audibly. A shiver scuttler, though they had no name for it yet. It paused at the edge of the foliage, its multifaceted eyes swiveling, seeming to assess them. It took a hesitant step onto the ice, then another, its movements jerky but purposeful. "What is that thing?" Lena breathed, her voice barely a whisper. "Stay still," Rex ordered, his voice low. "Don't make any sudden moves." The creature's head tilted, its mandibles clicking faster. It seemed to be sniffing the air or perhaps sensing something else. Its gaze fixed, not on Rex, the largest and most prominent figure, nor on Lena or Kenjiro, but directly on Sami. Sami's breath hitched. The creature took another step towards her, its movements becoming less hesitant, more focused. The burning cold that racked her body seemed to flare, as if in response to its attention. "Sir," Sami whispered, her voice trembling almost as much as her body, I think it's interested in me." The shiver scuttler let out another high-pitched chitter, lower in volume this time, almost a hunting hum. It began to move faster, scuttling across the ice with unnerving speed, its crystalline hairs catching the light, making it appear to shimmer. "Damn it," Rex swore, taking a step forward, raising the metal bar. "Get behind me, Begum." But Sami was frozen, not by fear alone, but by the sheer, debilitating intensity of her internal cold. She could only watch as the creature closed the distance. It was small, yes, but there was an undeniable predatory intelligence in its multifaceted eyes, a chilling focus in its approach. Kenjiro, seeing the creature advance, finally broke. With a strangled cry of "It's coming for the heat," it senses the cold as heat. He turned and bolted towards the jungle, slipping and scrambling on the burning ice. "Volkov, no!" Rex yelled, but Kenjiro was already disappearing into the shadows of the bizarre, fan-leaved trees. The Shiver Scuttler ignored Kenjiro's flight completely. Its attention remained locked on Sami. It was now only a few yards away. Rex moved to intercept, swinging the metal bar. The creature, with surprising agility, sidestepped the blow, the bar clanging harmlessly against the ice. It didn't even break stride, darting around Rex and making a direct line for Sami. "Sami, move!" Lena screamed, stumbling backwards. Sami tried. She willed her legs to obey, but they were leaden, unresponsive. The creature was almost upon her. She could see the intricate details of its mandibles, the cold light in its alien eyes. She braced for the attack, a fresh wave of icy agony washing over her. At the last possible second, Rex, recovering quickly, lunged. He didn't swing the bar this time, he used it to shove, catching the Shiver Scuttler in its segmented side. The creature let out an angry shriek and tumbled, its spindly legs flailing. It righted itself instantly, its multifaceted eyes now blazing with what looked like fury, and turned on Rex. It launched itself at the commander, claws extended. Rex met the attack with a grunt, bringing the bar down in a crushing blow. There was a sickening crunch. The creature spasmed, a dark, viscous fluid, almost black, oozing from beneath its shattered carapace. It lay still. Rex stood panting, the metal bar dripping with the creature's dark hemolymph. "Everyone all right?" he gasped, looking from Sami to Lena, then towards the jungle where Kenjiro had vanished. I think so," Sami managed, the adrenaline doing little to combat the profound chill that gripped her. "Thank you, Commander." Lena rushed to Rex's side. "Are you hurt?" Rex shook his head, just startled. He nudged the dead creature with his boot. "Nasty little bugger and fast." He looked at Sami. "It was definitely coming for you, Begum. Volkov might be crazy, but he might have been right about one thing. If it senses cold as heat, and you're radiating cold." "Then I'm a beacon," Sami finished, the realization hitting her with the force of another icy blast. In this scorching, inverted summer, her malfunctioning body, desperately trying to cool itself against a phantom freeze, was generating a paradoxical cold signature that apparently attracted predators adapted to hunt warmth. She was bait. "We need to understand what's happening to us," Lena stated, her voice regaining some of its professional composure, though her face remained flushed and sweaty. "Our suits are giving conflicting readings. Our bodies are reacting in completely opposite ways. This isn't just equipment malfunction. The Icarus cryo systems. There were always theoretical risks with rapid revival after deep freeze, especially with exposure to unusual atmospheric or radiological conditions during revival. If the ship's systems were compromised during the crash, and this planet has unique properties. The island did this to us," Rex said grimly, staring at his own hands. The skin on his knuckles looked distinctly thicker, the texture coarser than it had been just minutes ago. He flexed his fingers, a thoughtful, disturbed expression on his face. Something about this place. It's messing with our biology. We need to find Volkov, Sami said, her gaze drifting towards the jungle. He can't survive out there alone, especially if he's misinterpreting everything. Agreed, Rex nodded. And we need shelter, water, supplies. The Icarus is a wreck, but there might be salvageable sections. Main cargo hold, if it's intact, should have emergency rations and equipment. He pointed with the bar towards a larger, more intact section of the fuselage further into the trees, smoke still rising from it. Let's start there, but carefully, if there are more of those things. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The image of the shiver scuttler, its focused predatory intent, was seared into Sami's mind. As they began to move towards the larger piece of wreckage, Lena stumbled. "Commander, I need to rest for a moment, the heat. It's too much." She leaned against a twisted piece of metal, her breathing shallow. Sami, despite her own agonizing cold, felt a pang of sympathy. Lena looked genuinely unwell, her skin radiating a visible heat shimmer that was startling even to Sami's cold-addled senses. Rex paused. "All right, doctor, a few minutes. Begum, keep an eye out. I'm going to scout ahead slightly, see if I can spot Volkov or get a better lay of the land." Sami nodded, her gaze sweeping the perimeter. The silence of the jungle pressed in, broken only by the drip of condensation from the fan-like leaves, condensation freezing into tiny icicles as it hit the colder air near the ice-covered ground, despite the blazing sun. Contradictions. Everywhere contradictions. Lena slumped further, her head lolling. "Sami, your skin," she murmured, her eyes half closed. "It's almost blue and there's frost on your eyelashes." Sami touched her face. Her eyelashes were indeed stiff with tiny ice crystals. The cold was intensifying, creeping deeper into her bones. She wondered how long she could endure this before her system simply shut down. She was a paradox in flesh, a walking winter in a summer inferno, and the native life seemed designed to exploit that very contradiction. The search for Kenjiro and supplies had just begun, but already the island was proving to be a uniquely personal hell for each of them, and the Shiver Scuttler was unlikely to be its only monstrous inhabitant. Chapter 3: Whispers of Winter. Rex returned a short while later, his expression grim. "No sign of Volkov, but the main fuselage section is just through those trees. Looks like it came down hard, but it's mostly in one piece. Could be our best bet for supplies, maybe even a working comms unit if we're lucky." He glanced at Lena, who was still slumped against the metal, her breathing shallow. "How is she, Begum?" "Not good, Commander," Sami replied, her own voice tight with the effort of speaking through chattering teeth. "She's burning up, says her heart is racing. I don't know how much more of this heat she can take." Sami's own internal cold was a gnawing beast, relentless and all-consuming. The frost on her eyelashes had spread to her eyebrows. Rex knelt beside Lena, gently touching her forehead with the back of his gloved hand. Even through the glove, he recoiled slightly. "Gods, she's like an oven." He looked at his own hand again, the skin still darkening, thickening. A strange, almost reptilian sheen was becoming noticeable. This island, what is it doing to us? We need to get her into shade, Sami urged. If shade even helps her. The fuselage will offer some protection from the direct sun at least, Rex decided. Come on, doctor, up you get. Lean on me. With considerable effort, they helped Lena to her feet. She was weak, barely able to stand, her body radiating an intense heat that was palpable even to Sami through her layers of paradoxical cold. Every step was a struggle. The short trek to the main fuselage section was an agonizing journey through the bizarre, heat-drenched, ice-carpeted jungle. The fan-leaved trees towered above them, their waxy surfaces reflecting the harsh sunlight. Strange, brightly colored fungi grew in patches on their trunks, some pulsing with a faint, internal luminescence even in the bright day. The air was thick with the scent of unknown blossoms, hot metal, and an underlying earthy dampness that seemed to war with the frozen ground. Sami's cold intensified with every passing minute. Her movements became increasingly sluggish, her thoughts cloudy. She focused on placing one foot in front of the other, the crunch of the granular ice under her boots, a monotonous rhythm accompanying the symphony of her chattering teeth. She was a paradox, a creature of winter lost in a summer nightmare, and the island seemed to amplify her suffering. They finally reached the main section of the Icarus. It had plowed a deep furrow through the ice and alien vegetation, coming to rest against a grove of colossal, dark-barked trees. The hull was buckled and torn in places, but the primary structure seemed to have held. The main cargo hatch, miraculously, was partially ajar. "All right," Rex panted, helping Lena lean against the cool metal of the hull. "Begum, cover me, I'm going in." He squeezed through the opening in the cargo hatch. Sami stood guard, her borrowed metal bar held ready, her gaze sweeping the oppressive, silent jungle. The chittering shrieks of the Shiver Scuttler were gone, but the silence that replaced them was somehow more menacing. Every rustle of leaves, every drip of melting ice from the sun-warmed trees sounded like a potential threat. After a few tense minutes, Rex's voice came from inside, tinny and echoing. "Clear for now. Power's out, emergency lights are fried, but I think I found the emergency supply lockers. And maybe something that can help us understand this place." Sami helped Lena through the opening. Inside the cavernous cargo bay, it was dark and blessedly cooler, though for Sami the relief was minimal. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, burnt insulation, and the faint, lingering scent of the cryopreservative fluids. Emergency beacons cast feeble, erratic pools of light. Cargo containers were strewn about, some burst open, their contents spilled across the deck. Rex was standing before a bank of monitors, part of the ship's environmental analysis suite. Most were dark, but one flickered with a distorted display. "Look at this," he said, his voice tight. Sami peered at the screen. It was a garbled atmospheric composition readout, interspersed with telemetry data from the moments before the crash. Nitrogen, oxygen, argon, trace elements, all within breathable parameters, she murmured, trying to decipher the corrupted data. But this, radiation levels, off the charts during atmospheric entry, and a massive electromagnetic pulse just before impact. "The EMP would explain the power loss," Rex said, "but the radiation, Could that have compromised the cryostasis fields, accelerated or altered the revival process? Lena finished, her voice weak but her mind clearly still working. It's possible. Extreme radiation exposure during a critical biological state. It could scramble neural pathways, disrupt homeostatic regulation. She pressed a hand to her burning forehead. Our internal thermostats, they're broken. Broken and inverted in some cases, Sami added, hugging herself tightly. The cold inside the fuselage was marginally less intense than the direct, burning freeze of the sun-drenched ice outside, but it was still a profound, cellular chill. Rex pointed to another section of the flickering screen. And this, geological survey data from the initial orbital scan before everything went to hell. This island, it's not normal. Massive geothermal anomalies directly beneath us. And this is strange. Indications of extreme cryovolcanic activity. The two seem to be linked, intertwined. Geothermal and cryovolcanic, Lena frowned. Heat and cold side by side on a massive scale. That could explain the environmental paradoxes. The frozen ground under a hot sun. If the island itself is a source of extreme, fluctuating temperatures, it could be influencing the local climate in bizarre ways, Sami concluded. A scorching winter, a freezing summer. That's what it feels like. The inverse seasons, Rex muttered, the term hanging in the stale air. He looked at his hands again, the leathery patches of skin now more pronounced, like nascent scales. And it's changing us, adapting us maybe, or just breaking us. A sudden, desperate shout from outside shattered the relative quiet of the cargo bay. "Help! Please, someone help me! It's burning, it's burning!" "Volkov!" Rex exclaimed. He grabbed his metal bar and plunged back out through the hatch. Sami hesitated for a moment, then followed, the thought of facing the paradoxical nightmare outside less daunting than the idea of leaving someone to suffer alone. Outside, the scene was chaotic. Kenjiro Volkov was flailing at the edge of the jungle, not 20 yards from the fuselage. He was tearing at his clothes, his face a mask of terror and pain. "The air, it's on fire. My skin is blistering." But it wasn't the air that was his immediate problem. Coiled around his leg, almost invisible against the ice and pale foliage, was a thick, python-like vine. It wasn't constricting him in the traditional sense. Instead, it seemed to be radiating cold, intense, localized cold. Frost was visibly forming on Kenjiro's trousers where the vine touched him, and steam rose from his skin around the edges of the frost. The cryoconstrictor vine. "It's freezing me," Kenjiro shrieked, his voice cracking. "But it burns, the cold, it burns." His inverted senses were translating the vine's cryo-attack into an agonizing burning sensation. Rex rushed forward, but before he could reach Kenjiro, another horror revealed itself. From the dense undergrowth, a creature slunk out, low to the ground. It was reptilian, its scales the color of cooling embers, almost black. It moved with a sinuous grace, its eyes like molten gold. A cinder lurker. It ignored Kenjiro and the vine entirely. Its heated gaze was fixed on Sami. Sami froze. This creature radiated heat, a visible shimmer in the air around it. To her, in her perpetual internal winter, it was like a furnace approaching. a terrifying, predatory furnace. The cinder lurker let out a low hiss, a sound like steam escaping a cracked boiler. It took a step towards her, its powerful claws digging into the ice, which sizzled and melted beneath its touch. Two immediate threats. Rex was closer to Kenjiro, trying to figure out how to deal with the cryoconstrictor vine without harming the hysterical botanist. Lena was still inside the relative safety of the fuselage, too weak to help. That left Sami to face the cinder lurker. She raised her metal bar, her hands numb, her movements sluggish. The creature was a heat beacon in her icy world, a terrifying promise of warmth that she knew meant death. It gathered itself, preparing to pounce. This island wasn't just a paradox. It was a meticulously designed death trap. Its flora and fauna perfectly evolved to exploit the very conditions that were tearing the survivors apart, body and mind. And winter, it seemed, had many whispers, many forms, many ways to claim its victims. Chapter 4: The Scorch of Reason. The cinder lurker advanced on Sami, its molten gold eyes unwavering. The heat it radiated was a physical pressure, pushing against her, making the already frigid air around her feel even colder by contrast. It was a predator of the scorching winter. This much was clear, drawn to the absence of heat, to the cold spots in its fiery domain. And Sami, with her malfunctioning internal thermostat generating a persistent aura of cold, was an irresistible lure. "Begum, look out!" Rex yelled, still struggling with the cryoconstrictor vine that had ensnared Kenjiro. The botanist was screaming, clawing at the vine, his inverted senses interpreting its intense cold as an unbearable burning. Frost spread rapidly up his leg, a stark white against his dark trousers, while the skin around it paradoxically steamed. Sami backed away slowly, the metal bar held defensively. Her mind raced. The shiver scuttler hunted warmth in this freezing summer. This new creature, the cinder lurker, hunted cold. They were two sides of the same deadly coin, perfectly adapted to the island's inverse seasons. And the survivors, with their scrambled thermoregulation, were prime targets for both. The cinder lurker hissed again, a plume of superheated air escaping its snout, momentarily fogging Sami's ice-encrusted faceplate. It lunged. Sami, driven by a desperate surge of adrenaline that briefly overrode her debilitating chill, sidestepped the attack. The creature's claws scraped against the ice where she had stood moments before, the frozen surface exploding into steam. She swung the metal bar with all her might, connecting with the creature's flank. It was like hitting heated stone. The cinder lurker grunted, stumbled, but quickly recovered, its golden eyes blazing with renewed ferocity. Meanwhile, Rex had managed to get a grip on the cryoconstrictor vine. "Hold still, Volkov," he roared, pulling with all his strength. The vine resisted, its surface incredibly slick and cold to the touch, even through Rex's gloves. He could feel the unnatural chill radiating from it, a stark contrast to the ambient heat. His own skin, where the leathery patches were growing, seemed less affected by the direct cold of the vine, but his underlying flesh still registered the painful temperature. "It's wrapping tighter," Kenjiro shrieked. "My leg, I can't feel it, it's burning off." The cinder lurker circled Sami, its movements fluid and predatory. It was testing her, gauging her reactions. Sami knew she couldn't keep dodging it forever. Her energy was failing, the cold seeping deeper into her core. Lena appeared at the cargo hatch opening, her face pale but determined. She held a small, emergency flare gun, its muzzle distressingly tiny against the scale of the threats they faced. "Commander, Sami, what can I do?" "Stay there, Doctor," Rex grunted, still wrestling with the vine. "It's too dangerous." The cinder lurker lunged again. This time Sami wasn't fast enough. Its shoulder slammed into her, sending her sprawling onto the ice. The metal bar flew from her numb fingers. Pain, sharp and immediate, shot through her side. The creature loomed over her, its hot breath washing over her face, a welcome yet terrifying sensation. Its jaws, lined with needle-sharp teeth, opened wide. "No!" Lena screamed. She aimed the flare gun and fired. The flare, a bright crimson spark, shot through the air and struck the cinder lurker on its heavily scaled back. It wasn't enough to cause significant injury, but the sudden burst of intense, concentrated heat and light startled the creature. It roared, a sound like a steam engine derailing, and recoiled, shaking its head. That brief distraction was all Sami needed. Scrambling, she retrieved the metal bar. The cinder lurker, enraged, turned its attention back to her, but it was more cautious now. Rex, meanwhile, gave a final, desperate heave and tore the cryoconstrictor vine from Kenjiro's leg. The vine whipped back, thrashing like a wounded snake, then quickly retreated into the undergrowth. Kenjiro collapsed onto the ice, moaning, his leg a horrifying patchwork of white frost and red, blistered-looking skin, where the paradoxical sensations had caused him to tear at himself. "Got him!" Rex yelled. He saw Sami's predicament and charged towards the cinder lurker, metal bar raised. "Get away from her, you oversized lizard!" The cinder lurker, now facing two opponents, hesitated. It looked from Sami to the advancing Rex, its golden eyes calculating. With a final, frustrated hiss, it turned and bounded away, disappearing into the dense jungle with surprising speed, the ice melting and steaming in its wake. Rex rushed to Sami's side, helping her up. "You all right, Begum?" "Bruised," Sami managed, shivering violently. "But alive, thanks to Lena." She looked towards the cargo bay, where Lena stood, still holding the smoking flare gun, her hand trembling. "Good thinking, Doctor," Rex called out. "That flare might have saved her life." Lena gave a weak nod, then leaned heavily against the fuselage. My pleasure," she gasped, the effort clearly costing her. They helped Kenjiro back into the cargo bay. His afflicted leg was a mess. Lena, despite her own debilitating heat, immediately went into doctor mode, rummaging through a salvaged medkit. "Frostbite," she diagnosed, examining Kenjiro's leg. "Severe, but also what looked like friction burns where you were clawing at it." She looked at Kenjiro, her expression a mixture of pity and frustration. "Kenjiro, you have to understand what you feel as burning from that vine. It's intense cold. Your senses are lying to you." Kenjiro stared at his leg, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. "Cold, but it seared me like a brand." He looked up at Lena, then at Sami. "This place, it's twisting everything. My mind. I don't know what's real anymore." "None of us do," Rex said grimly. He paced the confined space of the cargo bay, his gaze sweeping over his battered, traumatized crew. Sami was practically blue with cold frost clinging to her hair and suit. Lena was flushed and sweating profusely, looking like she was on the verge of heat stroke. Kenjiro was nursing a grotesquely injured leg, a victim of his own inverted senses. And Rex himself, he looked at his hands. The leathery, scale-like patches were spreading, covering more of his knuckles, creeping up his forearms. His skin felt tight, alien. "We need a plan," Rex stated, his voice rough. "We can't just react to whatever this island throws at us. We need to be proactive. Shelter first and foremost. This fuselage is temporary. It's exposed. We need something more defensible." "And water," Lena added, her voice raspy. "Clean water. My body is losing fluids at an alarming rate." "Food, too," Sami chimed in, though the thought of eating was abhorrent to her in her frozen state. "Emergency rations won't last forever." Rex nodded. "All right, first light tomorrow, or whatever passes for light in this hell. We fortify this position as best we can. Then a scouting party. We need to find a reliable water source, assess the local wildlife, and try to get a better understanding of this island's insane weather cycle." He looked at Sami. "Begum, your condition. You're a magnet for those cold-hunting creatures like that cinder lurker, and probably for the heat hunters too, if they sense you as a cold spot. We need to find a way to mask your thermal signature, or keep you insulated." Sami shivered. "I don't know how, Commander. I'm generating this cold from the inside. It's not just my suit." "We'll figure something out," Rex said, though his voice lacked conviction. He looked at his own changing skin. "We all have our own battles to fight here." The rest of the day, if it could be called that, in a place where the sun blazed with winter intensity and the ground remained frozen, was spent in a state of uneasy truce with the island. They found more emergency ration packs, some water purification tablets, and a couple of high-intensity flashlights that still worked. Rex and Sami took turns standing guard at the cargo hatch, peering out into the oppressive, silent jungle, while Lena tended to Kenjiro's leg and tried to manage her own raging internal heat. As the blinding sun finally began to dip below the horizon, painting the bizarre, fan-leaved trees in hues of orange and purple, a new phenomenon occurred. The ambient temperature, which had remained consistently in the high 40s Celsius, began to plummet rapidly. Within an hour, Sami's suit sensors were registering 20 degrees C, then 10 degrees C, then 0 degrees C. And for Sami, the agonizing, burning cold that had tormented her began to lessen. The chattering of her teeth subsided. The feeling of ice in her veins started to recede. As the external temperature dropped into the negatives, she felt almost normal. A little cool, perhaps, but nothing like the excruciating freeze she had endured under the blazing sun. Conversely, Lena, who had been suffering from intense heat, began to shiver. It's getting cold," she said, her teeth starting to chatter. "So suddenly." Kenjiro, too, reacted. "Ah, finally the fire is dying down. It's becoming cool, pleasant even." He sighed in relief, despite the actual temperature now being well below freezing. Rex watched them all, his expression unreadable. The leathery patches on his skin seemed to offer him some protection from the dropping temperature. He merely pulled his torn collar tighter. "So," he said, his voice heavy with implication, "the day is a freezing summer, and the night—" He didn't need to finish. As the temperature continued to drop, reaching -15 degrees C according to Sami's now more reliable suit sensors, the true nature of the island's cycle began to dawn on them. This wasn't just a place of inverted seasons. It was a place where the daily temperature swing was an extreme, accelerated version of that inversion. Sami felt a flicker of hope. If night brought genuinely cold temperatures, perhaps she could function. Perhaps she could survive. But then a new dread settled in. What about Lena? What about the others whose bodies reacted normally to cold? And what new horrors would this freezing, dark summer night bring? The shiver scuttler, the creature that hunted warmth, would be in its element now. The scorch of reason had given way to a chilling new reality. The island was a relentless, ever-changing torment, its rules arbitrary and cruel, its dangers multifaceted. And the night was just beginning. Chapter 5: The Chill of Revelation. The temperature continued its precipitous descent. Sami's suit sensors now read degrees C. The interior of the fuselage, despite its metal shell, offered little insulation against the penetrating cold. For Sami, however, this was a reprieve. The agonizing, paradoxical cold that had gripped her under the blazing sun had vanished, replaced by a manageable coolness. She could think clearly, move without her limbs feeling like brittle ice. Lena, however, was in dire straits. She was huddled in a corner, wrapped in several emergency thermal blankets Rex had found, yet she shivered uncontrollably. Her face was pale, her lips tinged with blue. "So cold," she chattered, her breath plumbing in the frigid air of the cargo bay. My internal fire, it's gone out." Kenjiro, conversely, seemed almost comfortable. "Ah, this is much better," he sighed, stretching his limbs, careful of his injured leg. "The oppressive heat has finally broken. It's brisk, invigorating." He seemed oblivious to Lena's suffering, lost in his own inverted sensory world. Rex watched them, his expression hard to read in the dim, flickering emergency lights. The leathery, scale-like patches on his skin were now clearly visible, covering his hands and extending up his forearms, visible at his neck. He seemed less affected by the extreme cold than Lena, but he wasn't comfortable. He rubbed his arms briskly. "This island, it's a damn chameleon. Every hour brings a new way to kill us." "Commander," Sami said, her voice surprisingly steady, "with the temperature like this, I can function. I can take first watch. You and Lena need to conserve your energy." Rex looked at her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "You sure, Begum? You were practically a popsicle a few hours ago." "I'm better now, sir. This cold, it feels almost normal to me, as long as the ambient temperature stays this low." She didn't add the corollary. If the sun returned with its burning winter, she would be incapacitated again. "All right," Rex conceded. "1 hour watch, then wake me. And for God's sake, be careful. If that shiver scuttler was active in the heat of the day, imagine what it's like now in its element." Sami nodded, taking the metal bar. She moved to the partially open cargo hatch, peering out into the freezing darkness. The landscape beyond was transformed. The granular ice that had sparkled under the sun now lay like a dull, white blanket under the light of two alien moons, one large and silver, the other smaller and an unsettling shade of bruised purple. The fan-leaved trees were stark silhouettes, their broad leaves drooping under a visible layer of new frost. The air was still, sharp and bitingly cold. She could hear Lena's teeth chattering behind her, a rhythmic, desperate sound. Rex was trying to make her more comfortable, tucking the thermal blankets tighter around her. Sami focused on the perimeter. The silence was profound, almost absolute. No insects chirped, no night birds called. Only the faint, almost subaudible hum that seemed to emanate from the island itself, a deep, resonant thrumming she'd barely noticed before. An hour passed, then another. Sami remained alert, her senses heightened by the cold that, for her, brought clarity. She felt a strange sense of reversed normalcy. This was her time, the freezing summer night. Then a sound, a faint, rhythmic clicking like tiny claws on ice. It came from the direction of the dense thicket where the first shiver scuttler had emerged. Sami tensed, gripping the metal bar. Her heart, which had been beating with a slow, steady rhythm in the cold, began to pick up its pace. The clicking grew louder, closer. She could make out movement in the shadows, pale shapes, low to the ground, scuttling with jerky, insectoid movements. Not one, several. A pack of shiver scuttlers. They emerged into the dim moonlight, their crystalline hairs glittering faintly. There were at least 5 of them, larger than the one Rex had killed. They moved with a coordinated, hunting purpose, their multifaceted eyes scanning their surroundings. Sami's breath caught in her throat. They hadn't spotted her yet. She was a cold spot in a cold environment. Perhaps to them she was invisible, but inside the fuselage. Lena let out a small, involuntary moan, her shivering becoming more violent. Rex was murmuring to her, trying to keep her conscious. The shiver scuttlers, predators of warmth, would be drawn to the heat Lena was still radiating, however feebly, and to Rex, who despite his adaptations, was still a source of biological warmth. One of the scuttlers paused, its bulbous head turning towards the fuselage. Its mandibles clicked rapidly. It had sensed something. Sami knew she had to act. If they reached the cargo bay, Lena and Rex would be in terrible danger. She couldn't let them get inside. She took a deep, cold breath, then stepped out from the cover of the hatch into the dim, eerie light of the twin moons. "Hey!" she shouted, her voice surprisingly loud in the frozen stillness. "Over here!" The shiver scuttlers all turned in unison, their multifaceted eyes fixing on her. For a moment they seemed confused. She was a cold anomaly in their cold world, not their usual prey. But then one of them, the largest, let out a high-pitched chitter and scuttled towards her. The others followed. They weren't drawn by her heat because she had little to offer them. Perhaps it was simply aggression or territoriality. Or perhaps they sensed the faint, lingering warmth of the recently occupied spot where she had been standing guard. Sami stood her ground, the metal bar held ready. This was a desperate gamble. She was faster, stronger in this cold, but there were 5 of them. The first scuttler reached her, lunging with its razor-sharp claws. Sami sidestepped, swinging the bar in a wide arc connecting with the creature's side. It shrieked and stumbled but didn't go down. Another one darted in from her left, mandibles snapping. She parried its attack with the bar, the impact jarring her arm. It was a chaotic, desperate fight. Sami moved with a speed and agility she hadn't possessed under the burning sun, the frigid air invigorating her. She struck out again and again, the clang of metal on chitin echoing in the frozen night. She managed to disable one scuttler then another, but they were relentless, their attacks coordinated. A claw raked across her arm, tearing through her suit, drawing a thin line of blood that froze almost instantly. The pain was a distant, cold ache. Another scuttler lunged for her legs. She kicked out, sending it tumbling, then brought the bar down on its head with a sickening crunch. 3 down, 2 to go, but she was tiring. Her breath came in ragged, white plumes. Rex appeared at the hatch, his face grim. He held one of the high-intensity flashlights, its beam cutting through the darkness. "Begum, what in God's name?" He saw the carnage, the remaining 2 scuttlers. "Get back inside, I'll cover you." "No, sir," Sami panted, fending off another attack. "They're after warmth if they get in, Lena." The 2 remaining scuttlers, perhaps sensing a new, warmer target in Rex, hesitated in their attack on Sami. They turned their attention towards the light, towards the figure in the doorway. "Damn it," Rex muttered. He knew she was right. Sami saw her chance. While the scuttlers were distracted, she lunged at the closest one, bringing the bar down with all her remaining strength. The creature's carapace shattered. It collapsed, twitching. 1 left. The last shiver scuttler, perhaps the pack leader, let out an enraged, high-pitched shriek. It ignored Sami and charged directly at Rex, scuttling with incredible speed. Rex stood his ground, flashlight beam fixed on the advancing creature. At the last moment, he dropped the flashlight and swung his metal bar, but the scuttler was too fast, too low. It ducked under the swing and latched onto his leg, its mandibles sinking deep into the flesh just above his boot. Rex roared in pain, stumbling back. He kicked out, trying to dislodge the creature, but its grip was like a vice. Dark blood welled from the wound, steaming in the frigid air. Sami rushed forward, but before she could reach them, Rex, with a surge of adrenaline, grabbed the creature by its segmented body and tore it from his leg. He slammed it against the metal hull of the fuselage with tremendous force. Once, twice, 3 times. The scuttler went limp, its multifaceted eyes dull. Rex sank to his knees, clutching his bleeding leg. "Gods, that hurts," he gasped, his breath ragged. The leathery skin around the wound was torn, revealing raw, bleeding flesh beneath. Sami was at his side instantly. "Commander, how bad is it?" "Deep," Rex grunted, his face pale in the dim moonlight. "Damn thing's got a bite like a steel trap." Inside the cargo bay, Lena, roused by the commotion, was trying to sit up. What happened?" she asked weakly. "Just a little night hunting," Rex said, his voice strained. He tried to smile, but it was a grimace of pain. Sami helped Rex back into the fuselage. The cold air was thick with the scent of blood and the strange, acrid odor of the dead scuttlers. Lena, despite her own debilitating weakness, insisted on examining Rex's leg. "Nasty puncture wounds," she pronounced, her fingers, though trembling with cold, surprisingly deft as she cleaned the injury with antiseptic wipes from the medkit. "We need to stitch this. Infection is a serious risk here, even in this cold." As Lena tended to Rex, Sami slumped against the bulkhead, exhausted but strangely exhilarated. She had faced the island's nocturnal predators and survived. More importantly, she had protected the others. In this freezing summer night, she was not a liability. She was a defender. But the revelation was a chilling one. The island offered no true respite. The day, with its scorching winter, incapacitated her and tormented Lena. The night, with its freezing summer, brought its own specialized horrors, threatening Rex and Lena, while offering Sami a dangerous, temporary advantage. There was no safety here, only a constant, shifting battle for survival, each phase of the island's insane cycle bringing new threats, new challenges. And with Rex now injured, their already precarious situation had just become even more desperate. The chill of revelation was that this island was a relentless engine of suffering, and they were caught in its icy, fiery gears. Chapter 6: The Weight of Command. The purple moon had set, leaving only the cold, silver light of the larger orb to illuminate the frost-covered landscape. Inside the fuselage, the air was thick with the metallic scent of Rex's blood and the dull ache of shared misery. Lena, her fingers clumsy with cold but her movements precise from years of training, finished stitching the deep puncture wounds on Rex's leg. Her own shivers were subsiding slightly as the external temperature began a slow, almost imperceptible climb from its degrees C nadir. For her, this slight warming was a small mercy. For Sami, it was the first hint of returning torment. Rex bore the procedure with stoic silence, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the bulkhead opposite. The leathery, scale-like skin around the wound made stitching difficult, the needle resisting penetration. When Lena was done, he flexed his leg gingerly. "Good work, Doctor. Feels tight." "It will," Lena said, her voice hoarse. "You need to keep off it as much as possible. Those mandibles, they tore through muscle." She swayed, catching herself on a nearby support strut. I need to sit down." The slight rise in ambient temperature was already making her feel flushed and weak again. Sami watched them, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Rex, their pragmatic leader, was injured. Lena, their only medical expert, was oscillating between debilitating heat and incapacitating cold. Kenjiro was still lost in his own sensory nightmare, his injured leg a constant source of paradoxical pain. And Sami herself, her brief period of competence during the freezing night was already beginning to wane as the external temperature crept towards zero. The familiar, burning chill was starting to seep back into her extremities. "Commander," Sami began, her voice losing its earlier confidence, a slight tremor returning. "Your leg. You won't be able to lead the scouting party tomorrow." Rex looked at her, his eyes narrowed. The skin around them was also changing, taking on that same thickened, almost armor-like quality. It gave his expression an unnervingly reptilian cast in the dim light. "No," he admitted, his voice flat. "I won't." He paused, then his gaze sharpened. "Which means you will, Begum." Sami stared at him. Me, sir, but I'm no leader, and what about when the sun comes up? I'll be useless. You were far from useless tonight, Rex countered, his voice firm despite his obvious pain. You saved our lives, and you're the only one of us apart from Volkov who seems to, for want of a better word, thrive in one of these damn extremes. He gestured vaguely. This island, it's forcing us to adapt or die. Your adaptation, however painful, makes you uniquely suited for night operations when those shiver scuttlers are active. But a scouting party needs to operate in daylight too, Sami argued, feeling a rising panic. To find water, to assess the terrain. Then you take Volkov with you, Rex stated. Sami and Lena exchanged incredulous looks. Volkov, Lena managed, her voice weak. Commander, with all due respect, Kenjiro is unstable. His perception of this place is dangerously inverted. He could lead them into disaster. He's also a xenobotanist, Rex reminded them, his voice hard. If anyone can identify edible plants or understand the bizarre flora of this island, it's him, and his inverted senses. Perhaps they could be an advantage in some twisted way. If he feels burning, it means extreme cold. If he feels freezing, it means extreme heat. He's a walking, talking thermometer, albeit a broken one. He grimaced. Look, I do like it either, but we're out of options. We need water. We need to understand this environment, and I can't do it. The weight of his injury, the burden of command under such impossible circumstances, was evident in the lines of exhaustion etched around his changing features. Sami felt a surge of despair. Lead a scouting party with Kenjiro Volkov, a man who perceived life-threatening cold as pleasant warmth and vice versa. It was a suicide mission. Yet looking at Rex's pale, pain-lined face, at Lena's debilitating weakness, she knew he was right. They were desperate. All right, sir, Sami said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. I'll do it, but if Volkov becomes a liability. You make the call, Begum, Rex said, his voice softening slightly. You're in command of the party. Your primary objective is water. Secondary, edible flora and a general assessment of the immediate area. Avoid contact with any fauna, if possible, and get back here before the sun gets too high and incapacitates you. He paused. And find some way to secure our position better. Those scuttlers, there will be more. The responsibility settled on Sami's shoulders like a physical weight, colder and heavier than any paradoxical chill the island could inflict. She was an engineer, a problem solver, not a field commander. But Rex was right. This island was forcing them into new, terrifying roles. As the first faint hint of dawn, a sickly yellow glow on the eastern horizon began to filter through the jungle canopy, the external temperature had risen to a mere degree C. For Sami, this was the edge of her tolerance. The burning cold was returning, making her limbs stiff, her thoughts sluggish. For Lena, it was a blessed relief from the deep freeze of the night. She was still cool, but no longer dangerously hypothermic. They roused Kenjiro. His leg was stiff and painful, but Lena had bandaged it securely. When Rex explained the plan, Kenjiro's reaction was predictably skewed. Scouting in this pleasant coolness, he said, a flicker of confusion in his eyes as he looked at Sami, who was now visibly shivering again. But, Begum, you look like you're freezing. Are you sure you're up to this? She'll manage, Rex said curtly. Your job, Volkov, is to identify anything useful, water sources, edible plants, and to warn Begum if you sense any. Extreme temperatures. Your burning is her freezing, remember that. Kenjiro nodded slowly, his gaze still troubled as he looked at Sami. I will try, Commander. Sami, armed with the metal bar and a salvaged cutting tool, and Kenjiro, hobbling on his injured leg and carrying a collection pouch, stepped out of the fuselage into the eerie twilight. The dead shiver scuttlers lay where they had fallen, their pale carapaces already dusted with fresh frost. The air was still bitingly cold, but the promise of the sun, and the agonizing freeze it would bring for Sami, loomed large. "Which way, Lieutenant Begum?" Kenjiro asked. His use of a formal address, though perhaps unintentional, underscoring the new, unwelcome weight on Sami's shoulders. Sami looked around. The jungle was a maze of bizarre, alien shapes. The Icarus came down in a roughly easterly direction, she said, her voice tight. There might be a stream or some sign of surface water if we follow the path of wreckage downhill. It was a guess, a desperate hope. They set off, Sami moving with increasing difficulty as the burning cold intensified its grip, Kenjiro hobbling beside her, occasionally murmuring about the pleasant, bracing air or the invigorating chill on his skin. It was a surreal, nightmarish partnership. The island was waking up. Strange, bird-like creatures with leathery wings flitted between the fan-leaved trees, their cries echoing in the frigid air. Patches of the luminous fungi pulsed with a stronger light as the ambient gloom deepened before the full sunrise. After nearly an hour of slow, painstaking progress, with Sami fighting a losing battle against her internal freeze, Kenjiro suddenly stopped. "Wait," he hissed, sniffing the air. "I smell steam and a strange, sweet scent over there." He pointed towards a dense thicket of thorny, dark-leaved bushes. Sami, her senses dulled by cold, smelled nothing but the damp earth and alien vegetation. Steam, in this cold. "Yes, and it feels wonderfully warm here," Kenjiro said, a look of blissful relief on his face. He pushed his way through the thorny bushes. "Come on, it's like a natural sauna." Sami hesitated. Kenjiro's wonderfully warm usually meant life-threatening cold for her, but the mention of steam. Could it be a hot spring, a source of water? Desperation overriding her caution, she followed him. The bushes opened into a small clearing. In the center, a pool of water shrouded in thick, billowing steam. The water was dark, almost black, and bubbles rose sporadically to its surface. The air around it was indeed warmer, a localized pocket of humidity. Growing around the edges of the pool were striking orchids, their petals a vibrant, feverish red. Fever-bloom orchids. "Water!" Kenjiro exclaimed, rushing towards the pool. "And it's warm, perfect for a drink or even a bath." He knelt at the edge, cupping his hands to scoop up the steaming liquid. "Volkov, wait!" Sami cried, a sudden, inexplicable dread gripping her. The sweet scent Kenjiro had mentioned was stronger here, cloying, almost sickly. And the steam, it wasn't just water vapor. It carried fine, almost invisible particles of pollen from the red orchids. But Kenjiro had already plunged his hands into the water, He brought them to his lips, then recoiled with a yelp. "Ugh, it's cold, freezing cold." He stared at the steaming pool in disbelief. But the steam, it felt so warm. Sami understood. The pool was likely a geothermal vent, superheated. But Kenjiro's inverted senses had perceived the intense heat as biting cold. The steam, however, carrying the orchid pollen, had given him a false sensation of warmth. As stared in confusion, he inhaled deeply, drawing in more of the steam and the pollen. His eyes suddenly glazed over. A strange, beatific smile spread across his face. "Oh," he murmured, his voice distant. It's beautiful, the colors, the memories." He swayed, then crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Sami rushed to his side. His skin was hot to the touch, his breathing shallow. The pollen from the fever-bloom orchids. It had induced not just a false warmth, but some kind of rapid, hallucinogenic effect. She was alone, deep in the alien jungle, with an unconscious, heat-stroked partner, and the sun, the harbinger of her own personal agony, was beginning to crest the horizon, its first rays filtering through the bizarre canopy. The weight of command had become a crushing, impossible burden. Chapter 7. The Bloom of Delirium. The first rays of the sun, slanting through the grotesque canopy, struck Sami's exposed skin like needles of ice. The familiar burning cold began its relentless assault, clawing its way from her extremities towards her core. She shivered violently, her teeth clicking together. Kenjiro lay unconscious at her feet, his skin radiating a dry heat, his breathing shallow and rapid. The air around the steaming geothermal pool was thick with the cloying, sweet scent of the fever-bloom orchids and their insidious pollen. "Kenjiro, wake up!" Sami knelt, shaking him roughly, her movements hampered by the returning stiffness in her limbs. "Volkov, damn it, you have to get up." He didn't respond. His face, flushed and beaded with sweat, was slack. His eyes rolled back slightly. The fever-bloom pollen had taken him down hard. Sami cursed, her breath a white plume in the rapidly warming, yet for her, rapidly freezing air. She couldn't leave him here. But she couldn't carry him either, not in her worsening condition. The sun was climbing, its light intensifying, each photon a fresh wave of icy torment. She looked around frantically. The geothermal pool, despite its heat, was their only potential water source so far, but it was clearly dangerous. The orchids. She had to get Kenjiro away from their influence. Gritting her teeth against the surging cold, she grabbed Kenjiro under the armpits and began to drag him away from the pool, back towards the thorny thicket. It was agonizing work. Her muscles, already stiffening, screamed in protest. Her grip was failing. Kenjiro was a dead weight. After what felt like an eternity, she managed to pull him a few yards away, into the relative shade of the fan-leaved trees, though the sun's rays still pierced through, finding her, freezing her. She collapsed beside him, panting, her body racked with shivers. The situation was dire. She was rapidly becoming incapacitated. Kenjiro was unconscious, possibly poisoned. They were deep in alien territory, with no water, and predators could be anywhere. The weight of Rex's command pressed down on her, a suffocating burden. She had to think. Her mind, clouded by the cold, struggled to focus. Water. They needed water. The geothermal pool. If she could collect some, get away from the orchids, perhaps they could purify it later if it wasn't toxic. She fumbled for the collection pouch Kenjiro had been carrying. It was empty. He hadn't had a chance to gather anything. She looked back at the steaming pool. The orchids seemed to pulse with a malevolent beauty in the strengthening sunlight. A new sound reached her ears, faint at first, then growing louder. A rhythmic, buzzing hum like a million tiny wings. It seemed to be coming from deeper in the jungle, in the direction the sun was rising. Sami tensed. Another threat. This island was relentless. The buzzing grew, becoming a palpable vibration in the air. And then she saw them. A shimmering golden cloud moving slowly through the trees, catching the sunlight. It wasn't insects, not in the traditional sense. It was a swarm. A swarm of minute crystalline particles like glittering dust motes, the glass storm drifters. As the cloud drifted closer, Sami saw that it wasn't just passively floating. It seemed to have a cohesive intelligence, moving with a slow, deliberate purpose. And where it passed, the fan-shaped leaves of the trees seemed to abrade. Tiny particles of green matter flaked off, as if scoured by a fine, invisible sandpaper. Sami's eyes widened in horror. This wasn't just a pretty phenomenon. It was dangerous. If those crystalline particles could strip leaves, what would they do to exposed skin, to lungs? The cloud was moving slowly, but it was heading in their general direction. And between her and the relative safety of the fuselage lay Kenjiro, the geothermal pool, and the path they had taken. She had to make a choice. Try to rouse Kenjiro again, risking exposure to the approaching glass storm, or abandon him and try to save herself, try to get word back to Rex and Lena. The thought of leaving him was abhorrent, but the alternative. She looked at the sun, now higher in the sky, its light a blinding, freezing glare. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Her fingers were numb, useless. She was losing the battle against her internal cold. Then Kenjiro groaned, his eyelids fluttered. So hot, he mumbled, his voice thick. Burning visions. Kenjiro, Sami leaned close, her voice urgent. Kenjiro, you have to wake up. There's danger, a storm of glass. His eyes opened, unfocused, pupils dilated. He stared at her but didn't seem to see her. The colors, he whispered. The beautiful, burning colors, they're calling me. He tried to sit up, his movements jerky, uncoordinated. No, Kenjiro, stay down. Sami tried to push him back, but he was surprisingly strong in his delirious state. He thrashed, trying to get to his feet, babbling about gardens of fire and singing light. The glass storm was closer now, a shimmering, golden wall drifting through the trees. Sami could hear a faint, high-pitched keening sound emanating from it, like wind whistling through a million tiny cracks. Desperation clawed at Sami. She couldn't fight Kenjiro and evade the storm. She was too cold, too weak. Then an idea born of pure panic. The geothermal pool. It was hot, dangerously hot for her, but perhaps the heat would counteract the glass storm's abrasive effects, or maybe the steam would disrupt its cohesion. It was a wild, desperate gamble. Kenjiro, she yelled, trying to break through his delirium. The pool, we have to get to the pool. He didn't seem to understand. He was still babbling, trying to stumble towards the rising sun, towards the beautiful, burning colors of his hallucinations. Sami made a decision. She couldn't save him if he fought her, but maybe she could use his delirium. "Yes, Kenjiro," she said, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. "The colors, they're in the pool. The most beautiful, burning colors are in the water. We have to go there." His glazed eyes flickered towards her, then towards the steaming pool. A flicker of something. Interest. Recognition. The water, it calls, like a cool flame. It was enough. He stumbled towards the geothermal pool, Sami guiding him, her own body screaming in protest as the sun's icy rays intensified. The glass storm was almost upon them, its leading edge beginning to pass through the thorny thicket. The air filled with a fine, glittering dust that stung Sami's exposed skin like tiny needles. They reached the edge of the pool. The heat radiating from it was immense, a suffocating blanket that, for Sami, translated into an almost unbearable wave of intensified cold. But she had no choice. "In Kenjiro," she urged, pushing him. "The colors are in the water." He stumbled, falling more than stepping, into the shallow edge of the pool with a splash. The superheated water, which he had earlier perceived as freezing now, in his pollen-induced delirium and with Sami's suggestion, seemed to fit his hallucinations. He sighed, a strange, blissful expression on his face, and submerged himself up to his neck, muttering about liquid light. Sami hesitated at the edge. The heat was a physical blow, but the glass storm was swirling around them, the air thick with glittering, abrasive particles. She could feel them on her suit, on her faceplate, a million tiny impacts. She took a deep breath, or tried to. The air was thick and hard to draw, and plunged into the pool after Kenjiro. The shock was unbelievable. The intense heat, translated by her malfunctioning senses into an all-consuming, explosive cold, was beyond anything she had experienced. It was like being flash-frozen, then shattered, then flash-frozen again. Her vision went black for a moment. She gasped, inhaling steam and the acrid, sulfurous scent of the geothermal water. But she was alive. The water, though a torment, was shielding her from the worst of the glass storm. She could see the glittering particles swirling above the surface, unable to penetrate the dense steam. Kenjiro was babbling beside her, lost in his own private, hallucinatory world. Sami huddled in the superheated water, enduring her personal Arctic hell, praying that the glass storm would pass quickly. Each second was an eternity of agony. The bloom of the fever-bloom orchids had led them into a delirium, and now they were trapped, poached in their own paradoxical miseries, as the island unleashed yet another of its subtle, horrifying wonders upon them. Chapter 8: The Geothermal Gamble. The superheated water of the geothermal pool was a relentless torment for Sami. Her body, already battling the paradoxical cold brought on by the island's sun, screamed in protest against this new, intense wave of internal freezing. Every nerve ending felt like it was simultaneously on fire and encased in ice. Her vision swam, black spots dancing before her eyes. She clenched her jaw, fighting against the urge to scream, to leap out of the pool and into the swirling, abrasive cloud of the glass storm. a fate that seemed almost preferable to this agonizing, watery inferno freeze. Kenjiro beside her was in a different world. He floated limply, a blissful, vacant smile on his face, muttering to unseen entities. The light, it sings to me. Warm, so warm. His skin, already flushed from the fever bloom pollen, was now an alarming shade of crimson from the geothermal heat, yet he seemed oblivious, lost in his delirium. Sami focused on the surface of the pool. The glass storm drifters still swirled above, a glittering, golden miasma. The dense steam rising from the superheated water seemed to act as a barrier, preventing the worst of the abrasive particles from reaching them. But for how long? And what would happen when the storm passed? Minutes stretched into an eternity. Sami's shivers became uncontrollable convulsions. Her thoughts grew fragmented, disjointed. She was losing her grip on consciousness, the extreme sensory overload threatening to overwhelm her. She thought of Rex, of Lena, waiting back at the fuselage. Had she failed them? Was this where her command, her life, ended boiled and frozen simultaneously in a stinking alien hot spring? Then gradually, almost imperceptibly, the density of the glass storm above began to lessen. The glittering cloud thinned, the keening, whistling sound fading. Patches of the bizarre, fan-leaved canopy became visible again through the dissipating haze. The storm was passing. With a surge of desperate resolve, Sami fought against the encroaching blackness. She had to get them out. Kenjiro was cooking, even if he didn't realize it. And she was on the verge of systemic collapse. Kenjiro, she gasped, her voice a raw whisper. The storm, it's going, we have to get out. He didn't respond, his eyes half closed, his smile serene. Sami grabbed his arm. His skin was frighteningly hot, slick with sweat and geothermal water. She pulled, trying to drag him towards the edge of the pool. It was like trying to move a waterlogged mannequin. Her own strength was almost gone. Somehow she managed to heave him partially onto the muddy bank. He flopped there, inert. Then, using the last of her reserves, she clawed her way out of the superheated water, collapsing beside him, gasping for air. The immediate relief from the pool's intense cold was replaced by the familiar, burning freeze of the sun-drenched air, now clearer but no less potent. The ground, still damp from the pool's overflow, steamed around them. The fever-bloom orchids, their vibrant red petals untouched by the glass storm, seemed to mock her with their silent, malevolent beauty. Sami lay there for a long moment, her body a symphony of pain, but she couldn't rest. They were still dangerously exposed. And Kenjiro, he needed help. She forced herself to sit up. Her vision was clearer now, though her limbs were heavy, unresponsive. She checked Kenjiro. His breathing was shallow, his pulse rapid and thready. Heat stroke, severe heat stroke, on top of whatever the fever-bloom pollen had done to him. Water, they needed water, but not from this toxic geothermal soup. She scanned the area. The glass storm had scoured the nearby vegetation, leaving leaves shredded and bark pitted. But further away, the jungle seemed relatively untouched. Her gaze fell on Kenjiro's collection pouch, still lying where he dropped it. And then she remembered. Before the orchids, before the glass storm, they had been following the path of wreckage. The Icarus debris field. There might be supplies, canteens, something. It was a slim hope, but it was all she had. Leaving Kenjiro, she couldn't move him further in her current state. She stumbled to her feet. Each step was an agony. The sun, now high in the sky, beat down relentlessly, its icy rays piercing her suit, her skin, her very bones. She retraced their path, her eyes scanning the ground, the trees. The jungle was eerily silent after the passage of the glass storm. Then she saw it, a glint of metal amongst the bizarre foliage. A battered, dented ration crate, probably flung from the cargo bay during the crash. With trembling, numb fingers, she managed to pry it open. Inside, amidst nutrient-paced tubes and emergency flares, were two standard-issue canteens. Both were full. Relief so potent it almost buckled her knees washed over her. Water, clean water. She grabbed the canteens and stumbled back to Kenjiro. He was still unconscious, his skin flushed, his lips cracked. Carefully, she uncapped one of the canteens and tried to trickle some water into his mouth. A little spilled out, but some went down. She drank sparingly herself, the cool liquid a shock to her system, yet undeniably vital. The burning cold within her didn't lessen, but some of the fogginess in her head began to clear. Now what? She couldn't stay here. The fever bloom orchids were still too close, their pollen potentially still in the air. And who knew what other horrors this part of the jungle held? She had to get Kenjiro back to the fuselage. But how? She looked at him, then at the path back. It was a long, arduous journey, especially for someone as debilitated as she was, and with an unconscious man in tow. Then her gaze fell on a broad, thick fan leaf torn from a tree by the glass storm. It was tough, fibrous, and surprisingly light. An idea sparked in her exhausted mind, a makeshift travois. It took her what felt like hours, her fingers clumsy and unresponsive, her body screaming in protest, but she managed it. Using the cutting tool, she fashioned crude lashings from vines, carefully avoiding the cryoconstrictor type, and secured Kenjiro to the broad leaf. Dragging him was brutal work. The leaf scraped over the icy ground, catching on roots and rocks. Sami pulled, stumbled, fell, got up, and pulled again. The sun beat down, its icy rays relentless. Her vision tunneled. Her thoughts became a primal mantra: keep moving, get back, survive. She had no idea how long she struggled, lost in a haze of pain and exhaustion. The jungle was a blur of alien green and sparkling ice. At one point, she thought she heard the chittering of shiver scuttlers in the distance, but dismissed it as a hallucination. They wouldn't be active in this heat, would they? Then through the trees she saw it, the glint of the Icarus fuselage, safety, or at least the illusion of it. With a final, desperate surge of strength, she dragged Kenjiro the last few yards, collapsing at the entrance to the cargo bay. "Rex," she croaked, her voice barely audible. "Lena." Rex appeared at the opening, his face a mask of concern. He was leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch, his injured leg stiff. Lena was behind him, looking pale and drawn but mobile. The sun was beginning its descent, and the ambient temperature, though still hot for Rex and Lena, was becoming less extreme, offering them a sliver of respite. For Sami, It meant the burning cold was slowly, agonizingly, beginning to intensify again as the day wore on. Begum, gods, what happened? Rex rushed forward, ignoring his own injury, and helped her pull Kenjiro inside. Lena gasped when she saw Kenjiro's condition. Heat stroke, and possibly toxic exposure. What were those orchids? Briefly, haltingly, Sami recounted their ordeal. The geothermal pool, the fever bloom orchids, Kenjiro's delirium, the glass storm, her desperate gamble. Rex listened in silence, his expression grim. The leathery, scale-like patches on his skin seemed more prominent, his eyes holding a new, harder light. "You did well, Begum," he said when she finished, his voice rough. "You got him back, and you found water." He gestured to the canteens. "That's more than we could have hoped for." Lena was already working on Kenjiro, trying to cool him down, checking his vitals. "He's alive," she said, her voice tight with worry. "But he's in bad shape. That pollen, and the geothermal heat. It's a dangerous combination." Sami sagged against the bulkhead, the last of her strength gone. The burning cold was becoming unbearable again as the afternoon sun blazed. She had survived. They had water, but the cost had been immense. And the island had revealed yet more of its horrifying ingenuity. The geothermal gamble had paid off barely. But it was a reminder that every resource, every potential sanctuary on this inverted world came with its own deadly price. Chapter 9: The Texture of Change. The long, freezing summer day finally began to yield to the equally extreme summer night. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows through the fan-leaved trees, the temperature plummeted. For Sami, this brought the familiar, blessed relief from the burning cold, a gradual thawing of her internal ice. For Lena, it was the onset of a new torment, the deep, penetrating chill that sent her huddling into her thermal blankets, her teeth chattering. Rex, his injured leg propped up, watched the transformation with a stoic, brooding intensity. The leathery, scale-like patches on his skin were no longer just patches. They were coalescing, spreading, forming a distinct, toughened layer over his hands, forearms, and neck. The texture was smoother now, less like cracked leather and more like fine, overlapping scales with an oily sheen that caught the dim light of the emergency beacons. His fingernails were thickening, curving slightly, resembling nascent claws. "How's the leg, Commander?" Sami asked, her voice clearer now, the debilitating shivers receding. She felt a surge of energy, a familiar alertness returning with the encroaching cold. Rex flexed his injured limb, stiff, painful. He ran a hand over the scaled skin on his forearm. "But this new hide, it seems to offer some protection. The cold doesn't bite as deep as it did before, and the heat. It was still uncomfortable today, but not as debilitating." He looked at his hand, turning it over, examining the changing texture. "I'm becoming something else." Lena, despite her own suffering, looked at Rex with a mixture of medical curiosity and profound unease. "The adaptation is accelerating," she said, her voice muffled by the blankets. "Your body is responding to the extreme temperature shifts, to the island's environment, but in a way I've never seen. It's not just superficial. I suspect it's systemic." "Systemic how?" Rex asked, his voice flat. "Your metabolism might be changing," Lena explained, her words punctuated by shivers. "Your cellular structure. Even your DNA could be undergoing alterations triggered by the cryo mishap and this planet's unique radiation or other environmental factors. She paused. Commander, this island isn't just trying to kill us. It might be trying to remake us. The thought hung heavy in the frigid air of the cargo bay. Remade. Into what? Creatures adapted to this paradoxical hell. What would be left of their humanity if their very bodies betrayed them, transforming them into something alien? Kenjiro, lying on a makeshift pallet, stirred. His fever had broken during the transition to night, the extreme cold apparently counteracting the effects of the heat stroke and the fever bloom pollen. He blinked, his eyes focusing slowly. Where? What happened? He murmured, his voice weak. You took an unscheduled dip in a hot spring and got a lungful of happy flowers, Rex said dryly. Begum dragged your sorry hide back here. Kenjiro looked at Sami, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning shame. I remember. Colors and heat, burning heat. He touched his head. It felt wonderful and terrifying. He looked down at his bandaged leg, then at Lena, huddled and shivering. It's cold now. Welcome back to the freezer, Volkov, Sami said, not unkindly. Try not to go chasing any more pretty flowers. Kenjiro flushed. I'm sorry, I endangered you both. Just try to keep your inverted senses straight from now on, Rex grunted. We need your botanical expertise, not your suicidal curiosity. As the night deepened and the temperature plunged to its customary -20 degrees C, Sami took up her watch at the cargo hatch. The experience of the previous night, the fight with the Shiver Scuttlers, had emboldened her. The cold was her ally, her element. She scanned the moonlit, frost-covered landscape. The silence was broken only by the distant, eerie hum of the island itself. She thought about Rex's changing skin, Lena's warning. Remade. The word echoed in her mind. Was that their fate? To become monstrous versions of themselves, perfectly adapted to this nightmare, but losing everything that made them human. Her gaze fell upon her own hands. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the cold, but otherwise unchanged. Her affliction was internal, a malfunction of her thermoregulatory system. But Rex, his change was visible, tangible, a terrifying preview of what this island could do. Hours passed. The silver moon climbed high, casting stark shadows. Sami remained alert, her senses sharp. She was expecting another visit from the Shiver Scuttlers, but the jungle remained quiet. Perhaps their losses the previous night had made them more cautious. Then a new sound, not a scuttling or a chittering. This was a soft, rhythmic whooshing, like giant wings beating the air. It came from above, from the direction of the dark, looming mountains that formed the island's spine. Sami looked up, her breath catching in her throat. A colossal shape was silhouetted against the moonlit sky, circling slowly, gracefully. It was vast, its wingspan easily rivaling that of a small shuttlecraft. Its form was indistinct, ghostly, almost translucent, like a creature woven from moonlight and shadow. The phase moth. Sami had never seen anything like it. It was beautiful in a terrifying, alien way. As it circled, she noticed something else. The air beneath it seemed to shimmer, distort. Patches of the frozen landscape directly under its flight path would suddenly ripple, as if seen through intense heat haze, then quickly refreeze. The phase moth was altering the local temperature, creating pockets of paradoxical heat in the midst of the freezing night. Sami watched, mesmerized and horrified. What was its purpose? Was it hunting? Or was this phenomenon simply a byproduct of its passage? The moth completed another slow circle, then began to descend, not towards the fuselage, but towards a dense patch of jungle a few hundred yards away. As it neared the treetops, the shimmering distortion beneath it intensified. Sami could almost feel a wave of, not heat, but a strange, unsettling displacement of the cold, as if a bubble of wrongness were expanding outwards. Then from the patch of jungle where the moth was descending came a chorus of high-pitched, agitated chitters, shiver scuttlers. The phase moth wasn't hunting them. It was helping them, or perhaps disturbing them, creating an environment that was temporarily hostile even to those cold-adapted creatures. The moth hovered just above the treetops for a moment, the air beneath it now visibly steaming, frost melting rapidly from the leaves. Then, with a final, powerful beat of its immense, ghostly wings, it soared upwards, disappearing back into the darkness towards the mountains. The chittering of the shiver scuttlers subsided, replaced by an uneasy silence. Sami stared after the moth, her mind reeling. This island was a complex, interconnected ecosystem of horrors, each creature, each phenomenon, playing its part in a symphony of paradoxical torment. The phase moth, with its ability to locally invert the seasons, added a terrifying new layer of unpredictability. No place was truly safe, no condition truly stable. She thought of Rex inside the fuselage. If the moth could create pockets of intense heat, what would that do to him in his transforming state? What would it do to Lena, already suffering from the night's cold? The texture of their reality was constantly shifting, changing like Rex's skin. They were caught in a relentless cycle of adaptation and suffering, and the island seemed to possess an infinite capacity to surprise them with new, more insidious ways to break them. The weight of this knowledge was heavier than any physical burden. Survival here wasn't just about enduring the extremes. It was about understanding the patterns, the connections, the horrifyingly intricate design of their prison. And they were only just beginning to scratch the surface. Chapter 10: The Leech and the Loathing. The passage of the phase moth left an unsettling stillness in its wake. Sami remained on guard, the image of the colossal, season-bending creature seared into her mind. The island's capacity for generating new horrors seemed boundless. Inside the fuselage, the fragile peace was shattered by a low moan from Kenjiro. He was thrashing in his sleep, his face contorted. "No, get it off me. It's cold, so cold." Sami turned, concerned. "What's wrong with him?" Lena, roused from a fitful, shivering doze, crawled over to Kenjiro. "He was fine a moment ago," she said, her voice thick with fatigue. She touched his forehead. "He's not feverish. If anything, he feels cooler than he should even in this ambient temperature." Rex, awakened by the commotion, propped himself up on his elbow. "What now, Volkov?" he grumbled. Kenjiro cried out again, a choked, gurgling sound. He clawed at his chest, his fingers scrabbling at his shirt. It's inside, draining me. Lena quickly unbuttoned Kenjiro's shirt, and then she gasped, recoiling in horror. Attached to Kenjiro's chest, just below his sternum, was a creature unlike anything they had encountered before. It was slug-like, roughly the size of Sami's palm, its skin a pale, grayish-pink and semi-translucent. It pulsed rhythmically, and through its thin skin they could see dark, viscous fluid being drawn into its body. A thermal leech. "God's alive," Rex breathed, his eyes wide. "What is that thing?" The leech, disturbed by the sudden exposure, detached itself from Kenjiro with a wet, sucking sound, leaving behind a circular, inflamed wound. It writhed on his chest for a moment, its eyeless head waving blindly, then tried to burrow back into his clothes. Sami reacted instantly. She lunged forward, grabbing the leech with her gloved hand. It was surprisingly strong, its body cold and slimy, writhing in her grip. She flung it across the cargo bay, where it landed with a splat against a metal bulkhead and stuck there, poolsing. Kenjiro was gasping, his eyes wide with terror. "It was drinking my warmth," he panted, his inverted senses for once aligning with reality. "I felt an icy void spreading inside me." Lena was already examining the wound. "It's not bleeding much," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "But the tissue around it, it looks almost frostbit." She looked at the leech, now trying to crawl up the bulkhead. "It doesn't just drink blood, it drains thermal energy." "A parasite that feeds on heat," Rex said grimly, his gaze fixed on the repulsive creature. "In this freezing night it would seek out any source of warmth, and Volkov was the warmest one not wrapped in thermal blankets," Sami finished, a cold dread seeping through her. "It must have gotten in while we were distracted by the phase moth, or perhaps it was already here, dormant." The implications were horrifying. If these thermal leeches were active during the cold nights, they would target anyone radiating heat. Lena, Rex, even Kenjiro, whose internal thermostat was haywire but whose body still generated some warmth. Only Sami, in her paradoxical cold state, would likely be immune or even repellent to them. "We have to find out if there are more," Rex said, his voice tight. He struggled to his feet, leaning on his crutch. "Check your bedding, check the dark corners. These things could be anywhere." A frantic search ensued. Sami, using one of the flashlights, meticulously scanned the cargo bay. Her skin crawled at the thought of those cold, slimy things lurking in the shadows. She found another one, smaller, attached to the underside of Lena's thermal blanket, close to where her feet had been. Lena let out a choked cry when Sami pried it off and crushed it under her boot. It burst with a disgusting squelch, releasing a surprisingly cold, viscous fluid. They're like living cold packs," Lena stammered, her face pale with revulsion. "If enough of them attached to you, they could drain you dry of heat," Rex finished. "Freeze you from the inside out." He looked at his own scaled hands. "This damn island, it's got a specialized horror for every occasion." The discovery of the thermal leeches cast a new pall over their already grim situation. The freezing summer nights, which Sami had begun to see as her time of relative strength, were now fraught with a new, insidious threat. She might be safe from the leeches, but the others were vulnerable. They spent the rest of the night in a state of heightened alert, periodically checking themselves and their surroundings for any sign of the repulsive parasites. Sleep was impossible. Every itch, every rustle of fabric sent jolts of anxiety through them. As the first, faint hints of dawn approached, bringing with them the promise of the sun's icy torment for Sami and a reprieve from the deep cold for Lena, a new problem arose. Kenjiro, who had been quiet and withdrawn since the leech incident, suddenly sat bolt upright. "The water!" he exclaimed, his eyes wide with a new, dawning horror. "The canteens Sami brought back. Where did you find them, Sami?" Sami, already beginning to feel the familiar tendrils of burning cold as the ambient temperature started its slow climb, looked at him, puzzled. "Near the geothermal pool, in a ration crate from the Icarus." Kenjiro's face paled. "The pool, with the fever-bloom orchids." "Yes," Sami confirmed. "Why?" Kenjiro scrambled to his feet, his injured leg forgotten. He grabbed one of the canteens, uncapped it, and sniffed the contents cautiously. His expression turned to one of utter dismay. "This water, it's contaminated. I can smell it now, the pollen. It's soluble, it's in the water." Sami stared at him, then at the canteen in her hand from which she had drunk earlier. A wave of nausea, unrelated to her returning cold, washed over her. "Contaminated, but I drank some. Rex, Lena, you did too, didn't you?" Rex and Lena exchanged horrified glances. They had all drunk sparingly from the canteens after Sami's return, desperate for hydration. "The effects of the pollen when inhaled were rapid and intense," Lena said, her voice trembling. "But ingested, it might be a slower, more insidious absorption, or perhaps the concentration in the water is lower." She pressed a hand to her temple. I have been feeling a little lightheaded, disoriented. I thought it was just the heat, the stress." Rex swore, a string of curses that were shocking in their intensity. "So the water we risked our lives for is poisoned. This island, it's got a sick sense of humor." He looked at Sami, his expression unreadable. "Begum, you were closest to those orchids. You were in the pool with Volkov. How much of that steam, that pollen, did you inhale?" Sami tried to think, her mind struggling against the returning fog of cold. I don't know, a lot maybe, but I haven't felt any of the delirium Volkov experienced." "Perhaps your unique physiology offers some resistance," Lena speculated. "Or perhaps the effects are manifesting differently in you." She looked at Sami with a new concern. "Sami, have you experienced any unusual sensory distortions, hallucinations, beyond your normal temperature inversion?" Sami hesitated. The previous day, dragging Kenjiro back, she had thought she heard shiver scuttlers in the distance, dismissing it as a hallucination. Had it been? Or was it the pollen, subtly altering her perception, making her imagine threats that weren't there? Or perhaps making real threats seem unreal? The loathing for this island, for its relentless, multifaceted cruelty, filled Sami with a cold, hard anger that momentarily eclipsed even the burning chill of her malfunctioning body. They were trapped in a cycle of torment, where every solution bred a new problem. Every small victory was tainted with a new horror. The thermal leeches, the poisoned water. It was a never-ending assault on their bodies, their minds, their hope. As the sun climbed higher, bringing with it the full, agonizing force of its paradoxical winter, Sami knew they faced a new, desperate challenge. They needed uncontaminated water more than ever, and they needed to understand the full effects of the fever bloom pollen they had all ingested. The island was not just attacking them from the outside, it was now working its poison from within. Chapter 11: The Sunken Cost of Hope. The revelation of the contaminated water plunged the survivors into a new depth of despair. The canteens, once symbols of a hard-won reprieve, now sat like accusations in the dim light of the cargo bay. Each of them had drunk from the tainted source. Each was now a ticking clock, waiting to see how the fever bloom pollen would manifest its insidious effects. For Sami, the rising sun brought its customary agony. The burning cold intensified, reducing her to a shivering, almost incapacitated state. Her thoughts were sluggish, her movements labored. The fear of the pollen's effects was a dull throb beneath the overwhelming torment of her internal freeze. Lena, conversely, found relief from the night's chill as the ambient temperature climbed, but her face was drawn, her eyes shadowed with worry. "I feel strange," she admitted, her voice low. "A little dizzy, and there's a persistent, faint sweetness in the back of my throat, like the scent of those orchids." Rex, his scaled skin offering some protection against the heat, paced restlessly on his injured leg. "We can't afford to wait and see what this stuff does to us," he said, his voice tight. "We need clean water, now." He looked at Kenjiro. "Volkov, you're the botanist. Is there any way to purify this water, boil it, filter it?" Kenjiro, still shaken from his ordeal with the leech and the subsequent discovery of the contaminated water, shook his head. "Boiling might neutralize some biological contaminants, but if it's a chemical toxin from the pollen, boiling could concentrate it or alter it into something worse. Filtering. We don't have the equipment for fine particulate or chemical filtration." He looked at the canteens with a mixture of guilt and fear. "I should have realized the proximity to those orchids. It was a foolish oversight." "No use blaming yourself now, Volkov," Rex said, though his tone was harsh. "What we need are solutions." He turned to Sami. "Begum, you were out there. Did you see any other potential water sources? Anything away from those damned flowers?" Sami struggled to focus, her mind clouded by the cold. I don't know, sir, the jungle. It's all a blur. There might have been a stream, further west maybe, away from the crash site wreckage path." Her memory was fragmented, unreliable. "Then that's our objective," Rex decided. "A new scouting party, this time for clean water, and this time we all go." "All of us?" Lena looked at him aghast. "Commander, in this heat, I can barely function, and Sami, she'll be incapacitated. What about your leg?" "My leg will hold," Rex said grimly. "And we can't afford to split up again. Not with these leeches active at night and who knows what else. We move as a group, we protect each other." He looked at Sami. "Begum, you'll be our early warning system for extreme cold spots if your condition has any external effect. Volkov, you'll navigate by your inverted senses. If you feel burning, we avoid it. Lena, You'll monitor us for any adverse reactions to the pollen." It was a desperate, flawed plan, relying on their compromised abilities, but it was all they had. The journey out of the fuselage and into the blazing, freezing summer day was an exercise in collective misery. Sami, supported by Rex and Lena, stumbled blindly, her body a raging inferno of paradoxical cold. Lena, her face flushed and beaded with sweat, moved with a leaden lethargy, fanning herself weakly. Kenjiro, his injured leg causing him to limp badly, flinched and hissed at every patch of frozen ground, convinced it was burning him. Rex, his scaled skin providing some resilience, pushed them onward, his face a mask of grim determination. They headed west, away from the geothermal pool and the main debris field. The jungle here was denser, the fan-leaved trees taller, casting deeper, more inviting shadows that offered little relief to Sami's internal freeze, but were a small mercy for Lena. After an hour of agonizing progress with Sami on the verge of collapse, Kenjiro suddenly stopped. "Wait," he hissed, his eyes wide. "I feel intense cold like a glacier over there." He pointed towards a narrow ravine choked with thick, dark green vegetation. "Cold," Sami mumbled, her senses too overwhelmed to register anything but her own internal torment. "For you, Volkov, that means extreme heat." "Exactly," Rex said, his eyes lighting up with a flicker of hope. "A heat source in this freezing summer. It could be another geothermal vent, or something else." He looked at Sami. "Can you sense anything, Begum?" Sami tried to focus. The area Kenjiro indicated. It did feel subtly different, not warmer to her, but perhaps less intensely cold than the surrounding jungle, a faint lessening of her agony. "Maybe," she whispered, "it's less." "Then we investigate," Rex decided, carefully. They pushed their way into the ravine. The air here was noticeably warmer, humid. Strange, bioluminescent fungi clung to the damp rock walls, casting an eerie green glow even in the bright daylight. The ground underfoot was soft, loamy, not frozen. And then they heard it, the unmistakable sound of running water. Hope surged through them, a powerful, intoxicating wave. They rounded a bend in the ravine, and there it was. A small stream, its water crystal clear, gurgling over smooth, dark stones. It flowed from a fissure in the rock face, untainted by any visible orchids or geothermal activity. "Water!" Lena cried, her voice filled with relief. She stumbled towards the stream, falling to her knees at its edge. Rex and Kenjiro were close behind. Even Sami, her agony momentarily forgotten, felt a surge of profound gratitude. They drank deeply, the cool, clean water a balm to their parched throats, a reprieve from the fear of the poisoned canteens. For a few precious moments, the relentless horror of the island seemed to recede. But the island was never truly benign. As Lena leaned down to refill a canteen, she suddenly froze. "Commander," she whispered, her voice tight with a new fear. "Look." She pointed to the muddy bank of the stream. There, embedded in the soft earth, were footprints, not animal prints, humanoid, barefoot, and large, too large to be any of them. Rex tensed, his hand instinctively going to the metal bar he carried. Someone else is on this island. Sami stared at the footprints, a cold dread seeping through her, a chill that had nothing to do with her malfunctioning thermoregulation. They were fresh. Whoever made them couldn't be far. Then from deeper within the ravine came a sound, a low, guttural coughing, followed by a muttered stream of incomprehensible words. Rex motioned for them to be silent, to take cover behind a cluster of broad-leaved ferns. They waited, hearts pounding, as the sounds grew closer. A figure emerged from the shadows of the ravine. It was a man, tall and gaunt, his skin the color of old parchment, stretched tight over sharp bones. It was covered in a patchwork of what looked like ancient scars, some pale and puckered like old frostbite, others dark and keloid like severe burns. His hair was long, matted, and streaked with gray. He wore ragged scraps of what might once have been shipsuit material, crudely stitched together with vine. He carried a sharpened wooden spear. The weathered man. He moved with a slow, deliberate gait, his eyes, deeply sunken and disturbingly pale, scanning his surroundings. He didn't seem to have noticed them yet. He knelt by the stream, cupped his scarred hands, and drank, his movements practiced, economical. Sami, Rex, and Lena watched him, frozen in a mixture of fear and astonishment. This man, he was a survivor, someone who had endured this island perhaps for years. His very existence was a testament to a horrifying resilience. Kenjiro, however, reacted differently. The weathered man, with his scarred, heat-tanned, cold-ravaged skin, seemed to radiate a confusing mix of thermal signatures that overwhelmed Kenjiro's inverted senses. It's burning and freezing at the same time, he gasped, clutching his head. A paradox, a walking paradox. The weathered man's head snapped up at the sound of Kenjiro's voice. His pale eyes, shockingly intense, fixed on their hiding place. He rose slowly, his spear held ready, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He had seen them. The sunken cost of their hope, the clean water they had so desperately sought, had led them directly into a new, unknown confrontation. This island, it seemed, was not entirely uninhabited by their own kind, and the question of whether this other survivor was a potential ally or a new, more unpredictable threat hung heavy in the humid air of the ravine. Chapter 12. Echoes in the Static. The weathered man stared at them, his pale eyes like chips of ice, devoid of any discernible emotion save a primal, wary intensity. He held his fire-hardened spear loosely, yet with an air of deadly readiness. The silence in the ravine stretched taut, broken only by the gurgle of the stream and Kenjiro's ragged, fearful breathing. Rex was the first to break the stalemate. He stepped out slowly from behind the ferns, his hands held open, away from the metal bar that lay at his feet. His own scaled skin, a testament to his ongoing transformation, seemed almost a common language with this scarred derelict of a man. "We mean you no harm," Rex said, his voice calm, steady. "We're survivors, from a ship that crashed." The weathered man's gaze flickered over Rex, lingering on his changing skin, then moved to Lena, Sami, and finally Kenjiro, who was still muttering about burning ice and frozen fire. A low growl rumbled in the old man's chest, a sound more animal than human. He didn't lower his spear. "Ship," he rasped, his voice like stones grinding together. It was the first clear word he'd spoken. No ships come here, only the falling stars. He gestured vaguely towards the sky with his spear tip. We were a falling star then, Rex conceded. Our ship, the Icarus, broke up on entry. We're looking for a way off this island, or at least a way to survive it. The weathered man let out a dry, humorless chuckle that devolved into a coughing fit. Survive, he wheezed when he could speak again. This place, it does not allow survival, only endurance and change. His gaze drifted back to Rex's scaled hands, then to Sami, who was shivering violently in the humid heat of the ravine, her paradoxical cold a stark contrast to her surroundings. He seemed to study her with a peculiar intensity. "You are like the others," he rasped, his pale eyes fixing on Sami. "The cold ones. They burn when the sun sleeps and freeze when it wakes." Sami stared at him. The others, cold ones. Had there been more like her, more whose thermoregulation had been catastrophically inverted? "Who are the others?" Lena asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Were there other survivors before us?" The weathered man's gaze sharpened. "They came long ago, before the long scorch after the great freeze." He spoke in riddles, his timeline a patchwork of personal cataclysms. They did not endure. The island consumed them as it consumes all. He looked at Kenjiro, who was now rocking back and forth, holding his head. "The loud one, his mind is broken by the whispers." "Whispers?" Rex asked. "What whispers?" The weathered man tapped his own scarred temple. "The island hums, it sings, it tells you what you are, what you will become." He took a step closer, his spear still poised. "You have the mark of it too, scaled one," he said to Rex. "Soon you will not feel the sun's fire nor the night's bite. You will be of the island." Rex's jaw tightened. "We're not of the island, we're human, and we're getting off it." The weathered man's lips curled into something that might have been a sneer. "Human? That word has little meaning here." He gestured to himself, to his ravaged skin. "I was human, once." A sudden, piercing shriek echoed from the mouth of the ravine, the unmistakable chittering of a shiver scuttler. But it was midday, the height of the freezing summer's heat. Shiver scuttlers shouldn't be active. The weathered man tensed, his head snapping towards the sound. "They come," he hissed. "The cold claws, they hunt, even in the sun's madness when the whispers are strong." "Shiver scuttlers," Sami exclaimed, her own agony momentarily forgotten. "But it's too hot for them." "The island changes the rules," the weathered man rasped. "Always." He looked at them, a flicker of something unreadable in his pale eyes. "This place, the screaming stone ravine, it amplifies the whispers, makes the prey, confused, easy." Another chitter, closer this time. Rex grabbed his metal bar. "We need to get out of here." "No escape," the weathered man stated flatly. "They come from both ends, trapped." He looked at the stream, then at a narrow fissure in the rock face, partially hidden by vines. "Only one way. Follow, if you want to endure." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and scrambled towards the fissure, disappearing into the darkness within. Rex hesitated for only a moment. The chittering of the shiver scuttlers was growing louder, closer. He looked at his crew. Sami was barely standing. Lena was pale with fear and heat. Kenjiro was lost in his own sensory hell. "We have no choice," he said. "Move." They stumbled after the weathered man, plunging into the narrow, dark fissure. It was a tight squeeze, the rock walls cold and damp. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and something else, a faint, metallic tang like old blood. The fissure opened into a small cavern. Bioluminescent fungi coated the walls, casting an eerie, flickering green glow. In the center of the cavern, a crude fire pit, long cold. Animal bones, some cracked open for marrow, were scattered around. This was the weathered man's den. He was waiting for them, his back to a narrow tunnel that led deeper into the rock. "They will not follow us far in here," he said. "They fear the deep places. The old ones sleep there." "Old ones," Lena whispered, her eyes wide. The weathered man just grunted, his gaze fixed on the entrance to the cavern. The chittering of the shiver scuttlers could be heard just outside, a frantic, agitated sound. Suddenly Kenjiro let out a strangled cry. He clutched his head, his eyes rolling. "The whispers so loud there, they're telling me to offer myself to the cold, to become one with the ice." "Volkov, fight it!" Rex snapped, grabbing his arm. "The screaming stone," the weathered man said, his voice a low rumble. "It sings to the broken minds, shows them. Release." He looked at Kenjiro with a strange, almost pitying expression. Sami, despite her own suffering, felt a surge of alarm. The pollen. Was this one of its effects? Heightened suggestibility to some psychic influence of the island. The whispers the weathered man spoke of. The chittering outside intensified, then abruptly stopped. A tense silence fell. "They are gone," the weathered man announced after a long moment. "For now." He turned his pale gaze back to them. "You cannot stay here. This is my place." "We need to get back to our ship," Rex said. "Our shelter." "The metal shell," the weathered man almost sneered. "That will not protect you, not from the island, not from yourselves." He looked at Kenjiro, who was now limp in Rex's grasp, muttering incoherently. "He is lost to the whispers. Soon he will walk into the sun's freeze or the night's fire, seeking the island's embrace." "We won't let that happen," Lena said fiercely, though her voice trembled. The weathered man shrugged, a gesture of profound indifference. "The island always gets what it wants." He pointed down the narrow tunnel. "That way leads out, towards the silent peaks, far from here. Go, and do not return." Rex looked down the dark tunnel, then back at the weathered man. "Who are you?" he asked. "How did you survive here for so long?" The weathered man's lips twisted into a semblance of a smile, a horrifying death's head grin. "I am what this island makes. I am the echo, the remnant." He paused. "My name, I have forgotten it, or perhaps it was taken." He turned his back on them, moving towards the entrance of his den, his spear held ready. "Go now, before the true night falls, before the deep things stir." With no other option, Rex led his battered crew into the darkness of the tunnel. Sami, her body a raging inferno of cold, stumbled blindly, supported by Lena. Kenjiro was a dead weight between them, his mind lost in the island's insidious whispers. The encounter with the weathered man had offered them a brief, terrifying glimpse into a possible future, a future of eroded humanity and bleak endurance. His words about the whispers, about the island consuming its inhabitants, resonated with a chilling truth. They were not just fighting the elements, the creatures, their own fracturing bodies. They were fighting the island itself, a sentient, malevolent entity that sought to remake them, to absorb them, to reduce them to mere echoes in the static of its eternal, paradoxical existence. And the cost of hope, the clean water they had found, had been a terrifying immersion into the island's deeper, more insidious horrors. Chapter 13: The Whispering Sickness. The tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare. It twisted and turned, sometimes so narrow they had to squeeze through sideways. The air was cold, damp, and thick with the smell of decay and something else. A faint, ozonic tang, like the aftermath of a lightning strike, even deep underground. Bioluminescent fungi provided the only illumination, their ghostly green glow casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to writhe with unseen life. Sami, her paradoxical cold at its peak under the midday sun they had left behind, was barely conscious. She moved on autopilot, her legs leaden, her mind a fog of icy pain. Lena, though suffering from the ambient heat of their recent surface sojourn, supported her, her own face pale and drawn. Rex, gritting his teeth against the pain in his injured leg, took the lead, his makeshift crutch thudding dully on the uneven rock floor. Kenjiro, still lost in his delirium, was a heavy burden between them, muttering about ice gardens and singing frost. "How much further?" Lena panted, her voice echoing in the narrow passage. "This tunnel, it feels like it goes on forever." "The weathered man said it leads towards the silent peaks," Rex replied, his voice strained. "That means we're heading inland, away from the coast where we crashed." He paused, listening. "At least we can't hear those scuttlers anymore." But the silence of the tunnel was almost worse. It was a heavy, oppressive silence, broken only by their own ragged breathing and the drip of water from unseen fissures. And beneath it all, Sami could almost feel it, the faint, subaudible hum of the island, the whispers the weathered man had spoken of. It seemed stronger here, in the deep places of the earth, a resonant thrumming that vibrated in her bones, in her teeth. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel began to widen. The air grew fresher, though no less cold. Ahead, a faint glimmer of light. Hope, fragile and battered, flickered anew. They emerged from the tunnel into a vast, subterranean cavern, so large its ceiling was lost in darkness. The only light came from massive, crystalline formations that grew from the floor and walls, pulsing with a soft, internal luminescence like captive starlight. The air here was surprisingly still and much colder than the tunnel. For Sami, this brought a sliver of relief, a slight easing of her agony. In the center of the cavern, a still, dark pool of water reflected the glowing crystals, creating an illusion of infinite depth. The silence here was absolute, profound. "Gods," Lena breathed, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. "What is this place?" "The silent peaks, or under them at least," Rex surmised, his gaze sweeping the cavern. "The weathered man. He steered us away from our camp, but to where?" Kenjiro, who had been relatively quiet during the tunnel passage, suddenly stiffened. His eyes, though still glazed, focused on the crystalline formations. The "The singing stones," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "There, louder here, so beautiful, so cold." He tried to pull away from Rex and Lena, his gaze fixed on a particularly large, jagged crystal that pulsed with an intense blue light. "Volkov, no," Rex snapped, tightening his grip. "Stay with us." But Kenjiro was strong in his delirium. He thrashed, his eyes wild. "I have to touch it. It's calling me, the ice. It wants me." Sami, her mind clearing slightly in the cavern's deep cold, watched Kenjiro with a growing sense of dread. The fever bloom pollen, the weathered man's words about the whispers, this place. It was amplifying Kenjiro's mental breakdown. "The pollen we ingested," Lena said, her voice tight with fear. "It's not just causing disorientation, it's making us susceptible to this island's influence." She clutched her own head. I can hear it too, faintly. A kind of music pulling me towards the crystals." Rex swore, his scaled face grim. "We all drank that water, we're all at risk." He looked around frantically. "We have to get out of this cavern, find a way back to the surface." But there was no obvious exit, other than the tunnel they had come through. And going back meant facing the shiver scuttlers, the screaming stone ravine, the weathered man. As they struggled to control Kenjiro, who was now babbling incoherently about crystal hearts and songs of eternal winter, Sami noticed something else. Faint, almost invisible trails on the dusty cavern floor, trails made by something dragging itself, something large, leading from the dark pool towards the shadows at the far end of the cavern. "Commander," she whispered, her voice trembling, "we're not alone here." Rex followed her gaze. He saw the trails. His hand tightened on his metal bar. "The old ones," he muttered, recalling the weathered man's cryptic warning. "The deep things that stir in the true night." A low, guttural sound echoed from the shadowy depths of the cavern, a sound like stone grinding on stone, mixed with a wet, tearing noise. It was followed by a repulsive, sucking sound, like a giant plunger being pulled from thick mud. The thermal leech, but this was no small, palm-sized parasite. This sounded massive. From the darkness, a colossal, slug-like form began to emerge, its skin a pale, ghastly white, glistening with slime in the faint light of the crystals. It was easily 10 feet long, its eyeless head waving blindly, its immense, circular maw pulsing. It was a thermal leech negocios, a monstrous parent perhaps of the smaller creatures that had tormented them in the fuselage. It moved slowly, ponderously, dragging its immense, cold bulk across the cavern floor, leaving a trail of glistening slime. It seemed to be heading towards them, drawn by their body heat, their life force. Kenjiro, in his delirium, saw the creature not as a threat but as a messiah. "The great cold one," he cried, his voice ecstatic. "It has come for me, to take me to the heart of winter." He broke free from Rex's weakened grasp and stumbled towards the monstrous leech, his arms outstretched. "Volkov, no!" Sami screamed, but it was too late. The colossal leech, sensing Kenjiro's approach, paused. Its great, circular maw opened wider, revealing concentric rings of needle-sharp teeth. It lunged, its movement surprisingly fast for its bulk, and enveloped Kenjiro's upper body in its horrific embrace. Kenjiro let out a single, choked scream, a sound of mingled terror and ecstasy, then went limp. The leech began to pulse rhythmically, its translucent skin revealing the dark shape of Kenjiro being drawn deeper into its horrific gullet. Rex, Lena, and Sami watched in frozen, impotent horror. There was nothing they could do. Kenjiro, their comrade, their burden, their broken thermometer, was being consumed before their very eyes, a victim of the island's whispers, the fever bloom's poison, and his own fractured mind. The whispering sickness had claimed its first victim among them, and as the monstrous leech finished its gruesome meal, its eyeless head turned slowly, blindly, towards the remaining survivors, sensing their warmth, their fear, their despair. The cavern, once a place of awe-inspiring beauty, had become a tomb, and the old ones were stirring. Chapter 14: The Price of Delusion. The monstrous thermal leech, engorged and glistening after consuming Kenjiro, slid ponderously towards them. Its vast, circular maw, still smeared with the remnants of its meal, pulsed with a terrifying, relentless hunger. Rex, Lena, and Sami were frozen, not by cold but by a primal, paralyzing terror. Kenjiro's muffled, ecstatic screams still echoed in their minds, a horrifying testament to the island's insidious power over a broken psyche. We have to move," Rex finally choked out, his voice hoarse. He pushed Lena and Sami behind him, raising his metal bar, though it seemed a pitiful defense against such a colossal horror. His scaled skin prickled, not with cold or heat but with a raw, adrenal fear. The leech advanced, its immense, cold bulk seeming to suck the very air from the cavern. The bioluminescent crystals cast its shadow, vast and distorted, upon the cavern walls, a moving tapestry of dread. Lena, her face ashen, fumbled for the flare gun she still carried, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold it. It's too big," she whispered, her voice trembling. "A flare won't stop that thing." Sami, her own paradoxical cold momentarily eclipsed by the sheer, overwhelming terror, looked around frantically. The tunnel they had come through was their only escape route, but the leech was between them and it. They were trapped. Then her gaze fell upon the large, jagged crystal that Kenjiro had been drawn to, the one that pulsed with an intense blue light. The singing stone. It was close to the wall, and near it, a narrow fissure, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. A desperate, insane idea sparked in her mind. "Commander," she hissed, grabbing Rex's arm, "the crystal, and that crack in the wall beside it. If we can lure the leech towards the crystal, maybe its energy, or if we can break it, create a distraction." Rex looked where she pointed. His eyes, narrowed and calculating even in his fear, assessed the situation. The leech was slow. The crystal was massive, radiating a palpable energy. It was a long shot, a suicidal gamble, but it was better than waiting to be consumed. "All right, Begum," he said, his voice tight. "It's a crazy plan, but crazy is all we've got left." He looked at Lena. "Doctor, when I give the signal, you and Begum make for that fissure. Don't wait for me." "But Commander," Lena began, her eyes wide with protest. "That's an order, Doctor," Rex snapped. He turned his attention back to the advancing leech. "All right, you overgrown slug," he roared, banging his metal bar against the cavern floor. "Come and get me." The leech, its eyeless head waving blindly, seemed to orient itself towards the sound, towards Rex's defiant challenge. It changed course, sliding slowly, inexorably towards him. "Now!" Rex yelled. He charged not at the leech, but towards the giant blue crystal, his injured leg forgotten in the surge of adrenaline. Sami grabbed Lena's arm. "Come on," she urged, pulling the terrified doctor towards the narrow fissure near the crystal. The leech, confused by Rex's sudden movement, paused, then resumed its pursuit, its immense body scraping against the cavern floor. Rex reached the crystal just as the leech closed in. He didn't try to break it with his bar. Instead, he slammed his own body against it, his scaled skin scraping against the jagged edges. A shockwave of energy, cold and blue, pulsed from the crystal, bathing the cavern in an intense actinic light. Rex cried out, a sound of pain and effort. The leech, caught in the energy wave, recoiled, its pale skin rippling, its movements becoming erratic. "Go!" Rex screamed, pushing himself off the crystal. He stumbled, his scaled skin smoking faintly where it had touched the glowing stone. Sami and Lena scrambled into the narrow fissure, the rock cold and rough against their skin. Sami looked back. Rex was trying to draw the leech further away from their escape route, taunting it, dodging its clumsy lunges. The leech, disoriented by the crystal's energy discharge, seemed confused, enraged. The fissure was tight, claustrophobic. They squeezed through, scraping skin, tearing clothes. Behind them they could hear Rex's shouts, the monstrous sucking sounds of the leech, and the resonant hum of the disturbed crystal. Then a deafening crack like thunder echoed through the cavern, followed by a brilliant flash of blue light that penetrated even the narrow fissure. The ground beneath them trembled. A roar of pain, inhuman and monstrous, reverberated through the rock, followed by a high-pitched, agonized shriek from Rex. "Commander!" Lena screamed, trying to turn back. "No!" Sami grabbed her, pulling her forward. "We can't help him now. We have to keep moving." Tears streamed down Sami's face, freezing instantly in the cavern's deep chill, a strange mixture of grief and her own paradoxical torment, which was now returning with a vengeance as the adrenaline wore off. They stumbled onward, deeper into the fissure, which thankfully began to widen into another tunnel. The sounds from the cavern faded behind them, replaced by the drip of water and their own ragged, desperate breathing. They had escaped, but at what cost? Rex. Had he sacrificed himself to save them? And Kenjiro? His delusion had led him to a horrific end, a stark warning of the island's insidious power over their minds. The price of his delusion had been his life. The price of their survival. Was it Rex? The tunnel sloped upwards, the air growing faintly warmer, carrying the scent of vegetation of the outside world. After what felt like an eternity, they saw it, a dim light ahead. An exit. They burst out of the tunnel into the blinding, paradoxical light of the island's summer day. They were on a high mountain slope, overlooking a vast expanse of the bizarre, fan-leaved jungle. The fuselage, their temporary sanctuary, was nowhere in sight. They were lost, alone, and Rex was gone. Sami collapsed onto the frozen ground, the burning cold consuming her. Lena knelt beside her, her face a mask of grief and despair. She had lost a commander, a patient, and almost her own hope. "He saved us," Lena whispered, her voice choked with tears. "Rex, he saved us." Sami could only nod, her body racked with shivers, her mind numb with shock and loss. The island had claimed another. Kenjiro, a victim of its whispers, its poisons. And now Rex, a victim of his own courage, his desperate attempt to protect his crew. As the sun beat down, its icy rays searing Sami's skin, she looked out over the hostile, alien landscape. The island was a relentless engine of attrition. It had taken their ship, their senses, their sanity, their comrades. What more would it demand? The whispers Kenjiro had succumbed to. Lena had heard them too. Sami, in the deep places, had felt their thrumming resonance. The fever bloom pollen was still in their systems, a ticking time bomb. Were they, too, destined to become victims of the island's insidious mental assault? The loss of Rex, the pragmatic leader, the one who had held them together, was a devastating blow. Sami and Lena were alone now, two women against a world designed to break them. The fight for survival had just become infinitely harder, and the echoes of Kenjiro's ecstatic screams, of Rex's final, agonized cry, would haunt them for whatever time they had left. Chapter 15. The Fractured Reflection. Days, or perhaps cycles, of the island's perverse seasons, blurred into a monotonous litany of suffering for Sami and Lena. Without Rex's leadership, without Kenjiro's flawed but occasionally useful botanical knowledge, they were adrift. The loss of their comrades had left a gaping wound, raw and festering, in their small, shattered community. They had eventually found their way back to the relative shelter of the Icarus fuselage, a grim homecoming. The silence within its metal walls was heavier now, freighted with the ghosts of those they had lost. Sami, during the freezing summer nights when her paradoxical cold granted her strength and clarity, took on the burden of foraging for food and water, venturing out into the dangerous, moonlit jungle. Lena, weakened by the night's chill and the lingering effects of the fever bloom pollen, could only offer medical advice and a quiet, desperate companionship. The pollen, it was a constant, insidious presence in their minds. Lena complained of vivid, unsettling dreams, of a persistent, faint music that seemed to call to her from the depths of the island. Sami, too, experienced strange sensory distortions, particularly during the height of her daytime agony. Fleeting visual hallucinations, shimmering lights, distorted shapes in the periphery of her vision. And the whispers. They were stronger now, a constant, subaudible thrumming that seemed to resonate with the island's own perverse rhythm. One day, as Sami lay shivering uncontrollably in the fuselage, the burning cold at its zenith, Lena made a terrifying discovery. "Sami," she said, her voice tight with a new, horrified understanding, "your skin on your arm, look." Sami, her vision blurred by pain, struggled to focus on where Lena pointed. On her forearm, a small patch of skin, no larger than a coin, was changing. It was becoming thicker, smoother, with a faint, oily sheen. It looked disturbingly like the scaled skin that had begun to transform Rex. "No," Sami whispered, her voice a choked gasp. "It can't be." "The island," Lena said, her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "It's not just Rex, it's It's adapting us all, or trying to. The pollen, perhaps it's a catalyst, accelerating the process. She looked at her own hands, her expression fearful. What are we becoming? The discovery sent a fresh wave of despair through Sami. Her unique affliction, her paradoxical cold, had been a torment, but it had also been, in a strange way, a part of her. But this physical transformation, it was a betrayal by her own body, a horrifying sign that the island was claiming her, remaking her in its own monstrous image. The nights became Sami's only refuge. In the deep cold, her mind cleared, her body strengthened, and the spreading patches of scaled skin seemed less alien. She found herself moving through the frozen jungle with a new, almost predatory grace, her senses heightened. She learned to avoid the shiver scuttlers, to anticipate their movements. She even managed to hunt some of the smaller, less aggressive nocturnal creatures, providing meager sustenance for herself and Lena. During one of these nocturnal forays, she stumbled upon a place she had never seen before. A shallow, frozen lake, its surface like black glass under the twin moons. And in the center of the lake, an object. A perfect obsidian sphere, half submerged in the ice, humming with a faint internal energy. Drawn by an irresistible curiosity, perhaps a symptom of the pollen's influence, Sami approached the edge of the lake. The obsidian sphere seemed to call to her, its silent hum resonating with the whispers in her own mind. She stepped onto the frozen surface, the ice creaking ominously under her boots. As she neared the sphere, she saw her reflection in its polished black surface. But it wasn't her. The figure in the sphere was taller, more slender, its skin entirely covered in shimmering dark scales. Its eyes glowed with a faint blue light, like the crystals in the cavern where Kenjiro had met his end. Its hands were tipped with sharp, curved claws. It was a creature of the island, a perfect synthesis of human and something else. Sami recoiled in horror, stumbling back. The reflection. It was what she was becoming, what the island wanted her to be. The figure in the sphere smiled, a slow, predatory grin. And then it spoke, not with words but with a voice that echoed directly in Sami's mind, a voice that was a chorus of whispers, of rustling leaves, of cracking ice, of the island's own deep, resonant hum. "We are one, cold one," the voice whispered. "You resist, but the change is inevitable. Embrace it. Become what you are meant to be." Sami cried out, clapping her hands over her ears, though the voice was inside her head. She turned and fled, scrambling off the frozen lake, away from the obsidian sphere and its horrifying, fractured reflection of her future self. She stumbled back to the fuselage, her mind reeling. Lena was awake, her face pale in the dim light. "Sami, what's wrong? You look terrified." Haltingly, Sami described what she had seen, what she had heard. The obsidian sphere, the scaled reflection, the voice in her head. Lena listened, her expression growing increasingly grim. "The pollen," she whispered, "it's progressing, it's creating a psychic link to the island, to whatever consciousness resides here." She clutched her own head. "The music, it's louder now, and the dreams, I see, impossible geometries, shifting landscapes, and a voice. It tells me to surrender, to let the heat consume me, to become ash." They were both fracturing, their minds, their bodies. succumbing to the island's insidious assault. The physical transformations, the psychic intrusions. It was a multifaceted attack designed to break their will to remake them. As the summer night began to yield to the summer day, bringing with it Sami's agony and Lena's brief respite, a new, desperate resolve hardened within Sami. She would not surrender. She would not become that thing in the obsidian sphere. She would fight it, even if it meant fighting herself. But how? How could they combat an enemy that was inside their own heads, woven into the very fabric of their changing bodies? The answer, when it came, was as terrifying as the problem itself. It came from Lena, her eyes bright with a feverish, desperate lucidity as the sun's heat began to clear her mind. "The cryopods," she said, her voice hoarse. "The ones that are still intact in the wreckage, if we can get one operational, even partially, maybe we can induce a controlled stasis, slow down the transformations, silence the whispers." Sami stared at her. "Go back into cryosleep, here, on this hostile alien world. It was insane. What if they never woke up? What if the island interfered?" "It's a desperate gamble, Sami," Lena admitted, seeing the doubt in her eyes. "But what other choice do we have? Wait for the island to finish digesting us." The fractured reflection in the obsidian sphere, the whispers in her mind, the spreading scales on her skin. Sami knew Lena was right. It was a gamble, a terrifying leap into the unknown, but it was better than passively surrendering to the island's horrifying embrace. Their new, desperate hope, if it could be called that, lay in the cold, silent promise of the cryopods. A return to the artificial winter that had brought them here. A desperate attempt to outwit an island that seemed determined to claim their bodies, their minds, their very souls. Chapter 16. The Artifice of Winter. The decision to attempt a return to cryostasis hung heavy in the air of the fuselage, a desperate gamble born of encroaching madness and horrifying physical transformation. For Sami, the encroaching summer day brought its usual incapacitating agony, the burning cold a constant reminder of her body's betrayal. The patches of scaled skin on her arms and legs were spreading, an undeniable, terrifying map of the island's claim on her. Lena, despite the relative clarity the sun's heat brought her, was also deteriorating. The whispers, the faint, calling music she heard, were becoming more insistent. Her dreams were filled with landscapes of fire and ash, of a blissful surrender to a consuming heat. The fever bloom pollen was inexorably tightening its grip on her psyche. The main cryo bay. It was in the aft section, Lena said, her voice raspy as she consulted a crumpled, salvaged schematic of the Icarus. It took a direct hit during the crash, but some of the auxiliary pods, the emergency medical stasis units, they might be intact if we can find one with an independent power source. Their new objective was clear, yet fraught with peril. The aft section of the Icarus lay further inland, deeper into the island's hostile embrace, in an area they had not yet dared to explore. The journey was a recurring nightmare. Sami, barely able to function in the daytime freeze, leaned heavily on Lena, who, despite her own growing mental fragility, found a reserve of strength fueled by desperation. They moved slowly, cautiously, every shadow a potential threat, every rustle of the bizarre, fan-leaved trees a harbinger of unseen horrors. The island seemed to watch them, its silence pregnant with a malevolent intelligence. The whispers in their minds intensified, a chorus of insidious temptations. For Sami, it was the allure of the cold, of the strength and clarity the freezing nights brought, a siren's song urging her to embrace the spreading scales, to become the creature in the obsidian sphere. For Lena, it was the call of the heat, of a blissful, consuming fire that promised an end to all suffering, a merging with the island's fiery heart. They fought against the voices, against their own fracturing minds, clinging to the fragile hope of the cryopods. After hours of agonizing progress, they found it, the mangled, scorched remains of the Icarus, aft section, half buried in a shallow, ice-filled ravine. The stench of burnt metal and ozone still hung heavy in the air. The main cryobay was a disaster, a twisted wreck of shattered pods and sparking wires. But, as Lena had hoped, a small, reinforced compartment housing the emergency medical stasis units seemed relatively intact. With trembling hands, Lena managed to pry open the access hatch. Inside, 3 medical stasis pods lay nestled in their cradles. 2 were clearly damaged, their control panels dark, their transparent canopies cracked. But the third, its indicator lights flickered with a faint, hopeful green. This one, Lena breathed, her voice filled with a desperate excitement. Its internal power cell, it still has a charge. They examined the pod. It was smaller than the standard cryo units, designed for short-term emergency stasis. But it was their only chance. "One pod," Sami stated, the implication clear. "Only one of us can use it." Lena looked at Sami, her eyes filled with a mixture of despair and a dawning, terrible resolve. "You take it, Sami," she said, her voice firm. "Your transformation, it's more advanced, and your suffering during the day, it's unbearable. This pod, it might slow it down, give you a chance." "No, Lena," Sami protested, though the thought of escaping her daily torment of silencing the whispers was a powerful temptation. "You're a doctor. You have a better chance of figuring out what's happening to us, of finding a way to fight it." "There is no fighting it, Sami," Lena said, her voice flat, her eyes distant. "Not anymore. The island, it wants us. It's remaking us. I can feel it, the heat. It calls to me. It promises peace." A faint, beatific smile touched her lips, chillingly reminiscent of Kenjiro's final moments. "Lena, no," Sami cried, grabbing her arm. "Don't listen to it. That's the pollen talking, the island." Lena pulled her arm away gently. "It's too late for me, Sami," she said, her voice soft, almost a lullaby. "But you still have a chance. The cold, it's your strength. This pod, it can preserve that, use it, survive, and if you can, find a way to warn others about this place." Tears streamed down Sami's face, freezing on her cheeks. I can't leave you, Lena." "You must," Lena insisted. She moved to the control panel of the functioning stasis pod, her movements surprisingly steady, her eyes shining with a strange, feverish light. "I'll set the cycle for as long as the power cell will last. It won't be true cryosleep, more like a deep, induced hypothermic coma. It should slow your metabolism, your transformation, and hopefully silence the whispers. Sami watched, numb with grief and despair, as Lena activated the pod. The canopy hissed open, revealing a stark, padded interior. The air inside shimmered with a faint, bluish mist. "Get in, Sami," Lena urged, her voice gentle. "It's time." With a heavy heart, Sami climbed into the pod. It was a cold, clinical embrace, a stark contrast to the island's chaotic, organic horrors. As the canopy began to close, she looked at Lena, her friend, her last remaining comrade. Lena's face was serene, her eyes fixed on some distant, unseen horizon. The faint, sweet scent of the fever-bloom orchid seemed to cling to her, a perfume of surrender. "Lena," Sami whispered, her voice choked. "I—" "Hush now," Lena said, her voice barely audible above the hiss of the closing canopy. "Sleep, and perhaps dream of a world that isn't trying to eat you alive." The canopy sealed. The bluish mist intensified. A profound, numbing cold, deeper and more absolute than even her own paradoxical freeze, began to seep into Sami's bones. The whispers in her mind faded, replaced by a vast, encroaching silence. Her last conscious thought was of Lena, standing alone in the wreckage, a solitary figure succumbing to the island's fiery, insidious embrace. The artifice of winter, the cold, sterile promise of the stasis pod enveloped her. Whether it was a reprieve or merely a postponement of her inevitable fate, she did not know. She was alone, adrift in a frozen, silent sea, her only hope a desperate gamble against an island that had already consumed so much. The change was inevitable. The voice in the obsidian sphere had told her. But perhaps, just perhaps, she could choose the terms of her own surrender. Or if the universe was truly perverse, the terms of her horrifying, unending endurance. Chapter 17. The Hum of the Void. Time ceased to exist for Sami. The deep, induced hypothermic coma of the medical stasis pod was a void, a nothingness that was blessedly free of the island's torment. No burning cold, no spreading scales, no insidious whispers, just a profound, silent emptiness. How long she remained in that state she could not guess. Days, weeks, cycles of the island's perverse seasons. It was impossible to tell. The pod's internal power cell, designed for short-term emergency use, would eventually deplete. And then, what? The first sensation to penetrate the void was a faint, rhythmic hum. Not the threatening, subaudible thrum of the island, but a mechanical, familiar sound. The hum of failing machinery. Her eyelids, heavy as stone, flickered. Consciousness returned slowly, painfully, like thawing from a deep freeze. Her limbs were stiff, unresponsive. Her thoughts, sluggish and fragmented. Warning lights, dim and erratic, pulsed on the pod's internal display. The bluish mist that had filled the canopy was gone. The air inside was stale, recycled. The hum of the power cell was weaker now, interspersed with ominous clicks and whirs. With a monumental effort, Sami managed to activate the emergency release. The canopy hissed open, grudgingly, revealing not the familiar, grim interior of the Icarus wreckage, but something else. She was in a small, enclosed space, the walls lined with unfamiliar, glowing panels. The air was cool, sterile, and carried the faint, ozonic tang of advanced electronics. Outside the pod, she could see other similar stasis units, most of them dark, their canopies opaque. Where was she? This wasn't the Icarus. She struggled to sit up, her muscles protesting, her joints stiff. The patches of scaled skin on her arms and legs, they were still there, perhaps even slightly larger, but the progression seemed to have been arrested. The stasis had worked at least partially. As her senses slowly returned, she became aware of a new sound, a low, resonant thrumming that vibrated through the very deck beneath her. It was the island's hum, but amplified purer, as if she were now closer to its source. And the whispers, they were back, faint at first, then growing stronger, a chorus of insidious voices in her mind, no longer just tempting but questioning, curious. The cold one awakes, the voices seem to murmur. Unexpected, the cycle interrupted. Sami pushed herself out of the pod, her legs unsteady. She was weak, disoriented, but the burning cold of her paradoxical affliction was, for the moment, absent. The ambient temperature in this strange new place was cool, neutral. She looked around. She was in a chamber, circular and metallic, lined with rows of stasis pods. Most were inert, but a few, like hers, showed faint signs of power. The glowing panels on the walls displayed shifting, unreadable symbols, a language utterly alien to her. A single doorway, a perfect, iris-like aperture, led out of the chamber. It was closed. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Sami's grogginess. Who had brought her here? The weathered man? Unlikely. He feared the deep places, the old ones. Had Lena survived and somehow moved her? Impossible. The island's hum intensified, the whispers becoming a cacophony in her head. It resists, it seeks, it adapts. Sami stumbled towards the iris door, her hand reaching for a control panel beside it. The panel was smooth, featureless, activated by touch. As her scaled fingers brushed its surface, the iris dilated smoothly, silently, revealing a corridor beyond, bathed in the same cool, indirect light. Hesitantly, Sami stepped into the corridor. It curved away into the distance, lined with more of the glowing, symbolic panels. The air was still, sterile. This was no natural cave system. This was a structure, an artificial construction buried deep within the island. The whispers swirled around her, a confusing, overwhelming torrent of alien thought, of raw, primal emotion. She could feel curiosity, surprise, and something else, a dawning, cold intelligence. As she walked, the corridor began to slope downwards. The island's hum grew louder, more resonant, until it was a physical pressure against her eardrums. The whispers coalesced, forming a single, powerful mental voice, the same voice she had heard from the obsidian sphere. "You have come far, cold one," the voice resonated in her mind. "Further than the others, you have potential." "Who are you?" Sami managed to project the thought, her own voice a lost echo in the immensity of the mental contact. "What is this place?" "I am the island," the voice replied, its tone devoid of emotion, yet imbued with an ancient, unimaginable power. "This place is my heart, my mind." Sami stopped, her blood running cold, a real, instinctive cold, not her paradoxical affliction. She was inside the entity that had tormented them, the conscious, malevolent force that shaped their reality. You were an anomaly, the island mind continued. Your internal winter a flaw in your design, yet you endured, you adapted, the change. It suits you. Sami looked at her scaled hands. The change. It was no longer just a physical transformation. It was a connection. The stasis pod had slowed the physical process, but it had also somehow made her more receptive to the island's psychic influence. Or perhaps the island had used that period of unconsciousness to examine her, to understand her. The others, they broke, or they burned, or they froze. They could not find the balance, but you walk the edge of the paradox. You are interesting. What do you want from me? Sami thought, a tremor of fear in her mental voice. Want, the island mind seemed to consider the concept. I observe, I adapt, I integrate. You are part of the pattern now, cold one, a new variable in an old equation. The corridor opened into a vast, spherical chamber. In the center, suspended in a latticework of energy beams, was a colossal crystalline structure like a giant multifaceted geode, pulsing with an intense internal light, blue, green, violet, shifting and swirling. It was the source of the island's hum, the heart of its power. The deep lung, the geode city of somnambulists, the source of the whispers. And all around the chamber, lining the walls, were more stasis pods, hundreds of them, thousands, and in each pod a figure. Some humanoid, their forms twisted, adapted, scaled like wrecks, or desiccated like mummies, or encased in crystalline growths. Others, utterly alien, creatures of nightmare and impossible biology. The collection, the island mind said, its voice a cold, dispassionate whisper in Sami's head. Those who came, those who endured for a time, those who became part of me. Sami stared in horror. This was the island's true nature. It was a collector, a preserver, a parasite that absorbed, adapted, and integrated any life that fell into its grasp. The inverse seasons, the specialized predators, the psychic assaults. They were all part of a vast, intricate system designed to test, to break, to reshape. And she, Sami Begum, the Cold One, was its newest, most interesting acquisition. The hum of the void within the stasis pod had been a temporary reprieve. Now she was awake in the heart of the machine, face to face with the mind of the island. And the question that screamed in her silent, terrified thoughts was no longer about survival, but about identity. What would she become in this collection of horrors? Another forgotten specimen in a ST bay of the damned, or something more. The island had called her interesting. And in that cold, alien curiosity lay either her ultimate doom or a terrifying, unimaginable new beginning. Chapter 18: The Paradox of Being. Sami stood at the precipice of the vast chamber, the pulsating light of the colossal geode heart washing over her. The collective hum of 1,000 dormant lives a deafening chorus in her mind. The island mind's presence was overwhelming, a cold, ancient intelligence that saw her not as a victim, but as a component, a fascinating new piece in its cosmic, horrifying puzzle. You are different, Cold One, the island mind reiterated, its thoughts precise, analytical. Your internal cold, it resonates with the core. The others fought the change. You have the capacity to harmonize. Harmonize, Sami projected her thought laced with a defiant terror. You mean, surrender, become one of those specimens? She gestured to the rows upon rows of stasis pods, each containing a silent, transformed victim. Surrender is a limited concept, the island mind replied. Integration is. Evolution, the island endures, life adapts, that which cannot adapt is archived. A cold, emotionless statement of fact. Sami thought of Rex, his scales a mark of his forced adaptation. Of Lena, surrendering to the island's fiery call. Of Kenjiro, consumed by his delusions and the monstrous leech. They were all part of the island's process, one way or another. Your unique physiology. It offers new pathways, the island mind continued, its focus entirely on Sami. The inverse cold you generate. It is a mirror to the island's own paradoxical nature, a potential symbiosis. Symbiosis. The word sent a chill down Sami's spine that had nothing to do with temperature. What kind of symbiosis could exist with a parasitic entity that collected and transformed sentient life? What do you want me to do? Sami asked, her mental voice trembling. Observe, learn, become. The island mind offered no further explanation, its thoughts receding slightly, as if to give her space or perhaps to test her. Sami looked around the chamber. The geode heart pulsed, its light shifting, casting eerie shadows. The dormant figures in the stasis pod seemed to watch her, their silent, frozen faces a gallery of past failures, of unwilling transformations. She was alone in the heart of her enemy, her tormentor. Yet the island mind did not seem actively hostile. Curious, yes. Analytical, certainly. But not immediately threatening. It was as if she had passed some unspoken test, her endurance, her unique affliction marking her as something special. The patches of scaled skin on her arms and legs, dormant during her stasis, began to itch, to tingle. The change was reasserting itself, perhaps accelerated by her proximity to the island's core. The whispers in her mind, though no longer a chaotic chorus, were a constant, low hum, a subtle pressure urging her towards. What? Acceptance. Transformation. She thought of the obsidian sphere in the frozen lake, the scaled, powerful reflection of her potential future self. Embrace it. Become what you are meant to be. The island's voice, or her own subconscious, echoed in her memory. Was this her fate, to become another monster in the island's collection, or was there another path? The island mind had spoken of symbiosis, of harmonization. Could she negotiate? Could she retain some semblance of herself, her identity, even as she became part of this place? The burning cold, her lifelong torment, was still absent. The ambient temperature in the island's core was cool, stable. But she knew, with a chilling certainty, that if she were to return to the surface, to the inverted seasons, her paradoxical affliction would return with a vengeance. Unless the change, the transformation the island was urging upon her, offered a different kind of equilibrium. A terrible choice loomed before her. Resist and likely be archived like the countless others in their stasis tombs, or embrace the change, explore this horrifying symbiosis, and see what she might become. A monster, perhaps, but a monster that endured, a monster that understood, a monster that was part of something vast, ancient, and terrifyingly powerful. She looked at her scaled hands. They no longer seemed entirely alien. There was a strange, cold strength in them, a resilience she had not possessed before. The island was remaking her, yes, but perhaps, just perhaps, she could influence that remaking. The paradox of being, she thought, the phrase echoing with a new, chilling significance. To survive, she might have to become the very thing she feared. To retain her sense of self, she might have to surrender a part of her humanity. She took a tentative step towards the pulsating geode heart. The island mind's presence intensified, a wave of cold, analytical curiosity washing over her. It did not command, it did not compel, it simply observed, waited. Sami Begum, the Cold One, stood at the heart of a cosmic horror, a living island that collected and transformed life. Her past was a litany of suffering and loss. Her future was an unwritten, terrifying enigma. The only certainty was the change, and the choice was hers to make, or so it seemed. For in the grand, perverse design of the island, even the illusion of choice might be just another tool of adaptation, another pathway to integration. The hum of the geode heart filled her mind, drowning out all other thoughts, all other fears. It was the song of the island, the music of the void, the paradox of being. And Sami began to listen. Chapter 19. The Resonance of Transformation. Sami did not know how long she stood before the pulsating geode heart, bathed in its shifting, internal light. Time, in this subterranean core of the island, seemed as fluid and unreliable as the seasons on its surface. The island mind's presence was a constant, a vast, cool intelligence that observed her without judgment, without discernible intent beyond a pervasive, analytical curiosity. The scaled patches on her skin continued their slow, inexorable spread. It was no longer an alarming, alien intrusion, but a becoming. The itching had subsided, replaced by a sense of rightness. Her skin felt tougher, more resilient, yet strangely sensitive to the subtle energy currents that flowed from the geode heart. The whispers in her mind had coalesced into a single, coherent stream of information, not words but pure data, concepts, sensory impressions. The island was sharing itself with her, its history ancient beyond human comprehension. Its purpose, if such a term could apply to an entity so vast and alien, a cosmic archivist, a crucible of adaptation, a silent, patient observer of the rise and fall of civilizations across galaxies, collecting unique specimens, unique patterns of life and consciousness. She learned of the others, the previous cold ones the weathered man had spoken of. They too had possessed an inverted thermoregulation, a flaw, an anomaly. But they had fought the change, resisted the island's influence, and had ultimately been archived, broken, their potential unrealized. Sami was different. Her endurance, her accidental stasis, her proximity to the core. It had created a unique resonance. Her paradoxical cold, once a curse, was now a key, a frequency that allowed her to harmonize with the island's own fundamental nature, its constant, shifting dance between extremes. She began to experiment tentatively at first, projecting her thoughts not in fear or defiance but in curiosity. The island mind responded, not with words but with complex, intricate patterns of light and energy from the geode heart, with waves of pure, unadulterated information. It was a dialogue beyond language, a communion of consciousness. She learned to draw on the island's energy to subtly influence her own internal temperature. The burning cold of her affliction did not vanish, but she found she could modulate it, dampen its intensity, or even, paradoxically, amplify it, channeling it outwards as a wave of focused, numbing cold, a weapon, a shield. Her physical transformation accelerated. The scales covered her entirely now, shimmering with a dark, iridescent sheen like polished obsidian. Her fingers elongated, her nails hardening into sharp, curved claws. Her senses sharpened. She could see in the dim light of the geode chamber as if it were bright day. She could hear the faintest vibrations in the rock, the distant drip of water, the silent, rhythmic pulse of the dormant figures in their stasis pods. She was becoming something new, something that was both Sami Begum and something more, something of the island, the human fear, the grief, the despair. They were still there, but overlaid now with a vast, cold understanding, a sense of belonging to something ancient, powerful, and utterly alien. One cycle, for she could now perceive the island's rhythmic energy shifts that corresponded to its surface days and nights. She felt a change in the island mind's focus, a new input, a new anomaly on the surface. Life, the island mind projected, new life like yours, fleeing, resisting. Sami understood. Another ship had crashed. More survivors, more grist for the island's mill, more potential additions to its vast, silent collection. And for the first time, a new emotion sparked within Sami, something beyond fear, beyond understanding. A cold, predatory possessiveness. These new lives, they were an intrusion, a disruption to her newfound, precarious equilibrium with the island mind. They will be tested, the island mind communicated, its thoughts a cool, dispassionate assessment. They will adapt, or they will be archived. Sami felt a strange stirring within her, a resonance with the island's predatory imperative. She could almost feel the shiver scuttlers stirring in their icy lairs, the cinder lurkers basking in their volcanic heat, the thermal leeches questing for warmth, the phase moth preparing to weave its illusions. The island was preparing to welcome its new guests. But Sami, she was no longer just a guest, she was part of the welcome. She looked at her scaled hands, at the claws that were now a natural extension of her fingers. She focused her will, drawing on the island's energy, and felt a wave of intense, numbing cold emanate from her palms. The island mind's attention sharpened, a flicker of what might have been approval. The resonance strengthens, you understand the pattern. Sami understood more than the pattern. She understood the paradox of her own being. She had sought to escape the island's torment, only to find herself at its very heart. She had feared becoming a monster, only to discover a strange, cold power in her transformation. The new survivors on the surface, they would face the same horrors she had endured, the inverse seasons, the predatory creatures, the insidious whispers, the slow, terrifying erosion of their humanity. And Sami Begum, the cold one, now a creature of the island, scaled and clawed, her mind intertwined with the ancient consciousness of a parasitic world. She would be waiting for them, not as a savior, not as a fellow victim, but as part of the test, part of the welcome, part of the island's eternal, horrifying collection. Her transformation was nearly complete. She was no longer merely surviving. She was resonating. And the song she now sang was the cold, silent, predatory hum of the island itself. Chapter 20. The Curator of Frost and Fire. The arrival of the new falling star sent ripples of anticipation through the island mind, a subtle shift in the resonant hum that Sami, now deeply attuned to its rhythms, perceived with a cold clarity. She stood in the heart of the geode chamber, a figure of shimmering obsidian scales, her once human eyes now glowing with a faint, internal luminescence, reflecting the shifting lights of the colossal crystal. They are disoriented, the island mind communicated, a stream of sensory data flowing into Sami's consciousness, images of twisted metal smoke, figures stumbling through the paradoxical landscape of a freezing summer day. Their internal balance is disrupted, like yours once was. Sami felt a flicker of something distant, a phantom echo of her own past terror, her own agonizing confusion. But it was overlaid, almost erased, by her new nature, her cold, clear understanding of the island's processes. The new arrivals were not individuals to her now, not comrades to be saved or mourned. They were variables, raw material. The cycle begins anew, the island mind projected. The testing, the adaptation, the archiving. Sami extended a clawed hand, feeling the thrum of the island's power coursing through her. She could, if she wished, project her consciousness to the surface, observe these newcomers through the island's myriad senses. The eyes of a shiver scuttler, the heat-seeking pits of a cinder lurker, the rustle of the fever-bloom orchids as they prepared to release their mind-altering pollen. She chose instead to wait, to observe from the core. The island had its protocols, its finely tuned mechanisms of welcome and assimilation. She was a new component, a specialized instrument. Days or cycles passed. The island mind fed her information. The newcomers were struggling, as all did. Some succumbed quickly to the environmental extremes, their bodies ill-equipped for the inverse seasons. Others fell prey to the native fauna. A few, the more resilient, began to show the first signs of change, of adaptation, or of mental fracture as the whispers and the lingering toxins of the environment worked their insidious magic. One group, the island mind informed her, was proving particularly resistant, resourceful. They had found a defensible shelter, secured a source of clean water. They were learning to navigate the paradoxical hazards, to fight back against the smaller predators. They resist the pattern, the island mind communicated, a hint of something akin to frustration in its cool, analytical thoughts. They require a more direct intervention. Sami understood. The island had its baseline tests, but for those who proved too resilient, too adaptable in the wrong way, clinging to their old forms, their old identities, more specialized methods were required. The cold one, the island mind projected, its focus entirely on Sami. Your resonance is unique, your understanding refined, You will be the curator. Curator. The word echoed in Sami's transformed mind. A curator of frost and fire, an instrument of the island's will. She felt a surge of cold, exhilarating power. This was her purpose now, not to be a specimen but an active participant in the island's grand, horrifying design. She closed her glowing eyes, focusing her will, drawing on the immense energy of the geode heart. Her consciousness expanded, flowing outwards from the subterranean core, up through the rock and soil, spreading like a psychic mycelial network across the island's surface. She could feel the freezing summer sun on her phantom skin, the scorching winter winds. She could sense the fear, the desperation, the fragile hope of the new survivors, and she could influence. Subtly at first, a shift in the phase moth's flight path, guiding it towards the newcomer's shelter, its season-bending passage designed to sow chaos and confusion. A nudge to a pack of shiver scuttlers, directing them towards a scouting party, their chittering cries a prelude to icy death. A whisper in the mind of the group's medic, amplifying their anxieties, distorting their perceptions of their comrades' afflictions, sowing mistrust. She was an artist, painting with fear and despair. Her canvas the fragile psyches of the island's newest acquisitions. One survivor, a young woman with a particularly strong will, seemed to be a focal point of resistance. Her internal temperature regulation, like Sami's once had been, catastrophically inverted. She was suffering, but she was fighting, her spirit unbroken. Sami focused on this one. She remembered her own agony, her own desperate struggle, and she felt, not pity but a cold, analytical interest. This one had potential, like her. She reached out with her mind, not with the overwhelming force of the island mind, but with a more subtle, insidious touch. She did not offer whispers of surrender, but of understanding, of a different path. You are cold, Sami projected into the young woman's mind, a voice like ice and shadow. The world burns you, but the cold is strength. Embrace it. Let it remake you. She showed the young woman visions, not of the obsidian sphere, but of power, of control, of a way to transcend the suffering to become something more. The island mind observed, its presence a cool, approving hum. Sami was exceeding its expectations. She was not just a tool, but an innovator, refining the island's methods of assimilation. The young woman on the surface writhed in her paradoxical torment, but a new light flickered in her eyes. A dawning, horrified comprehension, a terrifying, seductive hope. Sami smiled, a slow, reptilian curve of her scaled lips. The cycle would continue. The island would endure. And she, Sami Begum, the cold one, the curator of frost and fire, would be there to welcome them, to test them, to transform them. She was no longer a prisoner of the island. She was its warden, its priestess, its most perfect, horrifying creation. The paradox of her being was complete. She had harmonized, and the song she now sang was the island's own, a symphony of endless, beautiful, terrifying change. The end.